Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lux Files. I'm Sean, your host, and with me I have author, artist, occult detective, my good friend, Bob Freeman. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Sean. It's so great to be with you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to have you. How's everything going?
It's going well. Yeah, it's out here in the haunted Hoosier heartland, so it's always exciting. So
I envy you where you live. I really do. I like the Midwest. I've traveled more in the States than I have in everyone probably by now knows that I'm Canadian and I live in Canada, but I've
right.
traveled more in the States than I have in Canada. And I used to actually live in the States. I lived in Houston and Austin in Texas. But I love the Midwest. I love the Midwest. There's something, you call it the haunted Hoosier land, like your the area you live in. But the Midwest, I find it's a it's a different place. There's a different energy. I don't know what it is about the Midwest, but there's just that magical earth energy atmosphere about the Midwest, which makes it less boring than cornfields.
Right,
You
right.
know what
Yeah,
I mean?
they always make that analogy. That's that the Indiana in particular is nothing but corn.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but the old commercial that you've probably seen a million times. There is more than corn in Indiana. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. No, I just like, I like the Midwest. I like it's a different place. It really is a different place. And I like the idea of living in a small town but not being so isolated. Like, there's this small town here and, just a quick drive there and da 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 da. Where like up here, me being in Thunder Bay, like it's just so isolated. You can't drive just in any direction and hit another little town. You know what I mean?
right, right. I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and we're just sprinkled with little towns.
Hmm.
And the nice place about where I live is, that there's a story everywhere you go.
Right.
There's an investigation just waiting to be had. It's a paranormal hotspot, really. So it's why I think like Michelle in Ohio probably has the same thing, and the Newkirks living down in Kentucky now in Hellier country.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah.
it's the same. It's the same vibe that we have here. So
Yeah, it's interesting you bringing up Hellier because Hellier, it was such a fascinating documentary and it's really made me rethink so much of my opinions and beliefs or lack of beliefs on certain things. But listen to them. I think I just watched season one for the millionth time again today, and I think it was Dana that in one of the episodes was talking about just the feel of the place and the energy and whatnot in the Appalachian Mountains. And
yes,
that place, I the best I've kind of described it as like it still has almost like a primordial feel to it. It's like the energies that created the planet, like those violent like inhuman energies that created the planet. They're still kind of lingering, where they're not good or bad, good or evil, benevolent, malevolent. They're just, I mean, a force that can create a planet like is creative, but it's also so destructive and impersonal. And it has that kind of that real primordial vibe to that area. It's quite the place. And it's
yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, don't, for anyone that's listening that's never been to the Appalachians, you've never been there, but you have those stereotypes of the people. It's, I mean, there's, some, anyways, it's beautiful country to travel, to explore, and it's an interesting place. So check out
Yeah,
Appalachia.
yep. Everywhere you turn, there's something special to see.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now you are like born and raised in the area you live in, or ish.
Yeah, yep, that's that. Yeah, most definitely. The place I live right now is a half mile from where I was born.
Mm,
So, I mean, I lived briefly in Boston. I lived briefly out in the desert Southwest, but I'd say lived. I was out there for a little over 6 months living on Indian reservations. So, but so other than that, I've been here and the brief
right.
time I was in college. So, I'm very connected to the land here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a moment when I had a kind of a spiritual awakening, and this would have been in 1988, I think. And I had what I could only describe as like a visitation by an entity beyond this realm, right? And it told me that as the world progressed, I needed to stay here. And it was at a time when I was thinking about possibly moving away.
Okay. How old
You
were
know,
you?
let's see, in 88, I would have been about 21, 22.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And it said, stay here. You need to be here. And I've never regretted that decision, and always took that moment to heart. Now,
Right. Right.
to be perfectly honest, I was under the influence of some powerful psychedelics. So, take that as you may. So.
Hey, I'm recently learning, not by personal experience, but I'm recently learning about the value of entheogens in, spiritual practice and development and whatnot. So I think there's more to it than just, oh, I was tripping and it was just a hallucination.
Exactly. What it does is it opens up certain pathways
Mm,
that are typically closed, that you can access through intense meditation.
yeah.
But it's a wonderful shortcut
Yeah.
that puts you right in the heart of a spiritual awakening, an experience. So
Yeah. 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 I
I
mean,
was in my
I
youth, I was definitely a proponent of it. So
I don't even smoke pot. So I mean, like I have no real concept of that, but just
yeah,
conversations with my friend Frater RC, I'm beginning to learn more and learn it, appreciate its potential value for
yeah,
some.
I quit exploring those avenues when my son was born,
Right.
just because I didn't want to be, like if you experience like say psilocybin or LSD, that's an 8 hour span of time that you are unavailable to anyone else. So I never wanted to be in a position where I would be needed and not be able to
Yeah.
to be there for someone. So
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Now
yeah.
that experience was that wouldn't have been like your first like aha spiritual or magical moment.
No. In fact, I got it involved in the occult very young. In fact, I was 8 years old when my journey really started. Prior to that, I'd been raised by parents that were both born in Arkansas,
Mm,
and they actually met up here uh, in this area. However, but they lived like 20 minutes from each other in Arkansas and had never met. They moved up here as like kind of preteens, and my father went to work with my mother's father on the farm, and so she was like the stereotypical farmer's daughter, and I was the product of that. So I was raised on a horse farm
right.
by a bunch of transplanted Arkansas folk, and they had all these just glorious folk tales from the Ozarks that they would sit there and tell me as a little kid. And I was just fascinated with that sort of stuff. And my father was really into horror movies and stuff like that. So, I spent long nights watching those kind of things, and it shaped me. And then, like I said, when I was 8, I was staying at my paternal grandparents' house, and they had a 2-story, maybe 150-year-old home. And I was upstairs kind of rooting around through some old trunks, and I found some things that had belonged to my great grandmother. And there was like astrological charts and stuff. She had like a diary where she was tracking the seasons for planting and all this stuff using astrology.
Right.
And she had a book in there called Unseen Forces. It was written by Manly Palmer Hall. And this book was all about elementals, the dweller at the threshold. And I'm reading this, and I was like, wait, this is real. This isn't some fairy tale story. This guy is explaining creatures that really exist. And I'd already seen The Exorcist. I'd been watching The Night Stalker on TV. So I was interested in those type of things already. And so this book kind of cemented for me that this stuff was real. So I guess to make a long story short, I lived on this horse farm, and a quarter mile from our house was a graveyard that was reputed to be haunted. And it had a great story behind it. And these are stories that my parents told me, and I heard from other people around town, farm hands and such. A cemetery, which was just off of Little Pipe Creek, maybe 100 tombstones in it, a big oak tree right in the center of the graveyard. And there was a fence around it with a gate. And whenever a girl would walk towards the gate would open, and she would be able to walk through. If a man tried to walk through, the gate would open, and then as he passed, it would swing and hit him.
Wow.
So that was, I gotta see this. Now, they had removed the gate because people had been getting hurt.
Okay.
But there's the graveyard. So let's see, just to explain it a little bit. We lived in 2 trailers on the edge of my grandparents' farm. And my brother and I had one trailer to ourselves, and my parents lived in the other trailer. So I was, like I said, 8, so my brother would have been about 4. And I had the door in my bedroom led to the outside, so I would just wait until everybody was in bed. I would sneak out at night, make my way up the road to that graveyard and climb up in that oak tree and sit there and wait for something to happen. And one night it did. I saw a full-bodied apparition materialize next to these old stones in the back corner, and it moved across the grass towards me. And of course, I was terrified and ecstatic all at the same time. And so that was the moment for me. That was that. Yes, okay. These things I've been reading about, they're all real. So that set me on a lifelong course of investigating the paranormal, exploring the occult, and in whatever way I could. I was lucky enough that our little small town library, a Carnegie library, thank goodness, it had a pretty good occult section for such a very Bible Belt oriented town.
Right.
Of course, this is the 70s, right? When all that stuff was just blowing up. So they had books by Sybil Leek. They had books by Gerald Gardner, Richard Cavendish. So I'm reading all this stuff too, and it just really was adding to my personal mythology. And about that time is when I read a book called The Children of Odin by Padraig Colum. And all about the Norse, folk tales. And I really took to that, especially when it was explaining how it was the religion of my ancestors. And I had never taken to the Christianity of my parents and grandparents, even though I was drug off to a Campbellite church, all throughout my childhood.
Did you say Campbellite?
Campbellite. Yeah, Campbell. It was an offshoot of Calvinism.
Okay.
Calvinism. Okay. Yeah. So, so they were very strict. For instance, women weren't allowed to wear pants. Women weren't allowed to cut their hair. You were not allowed to have instrumental music in church. You only sang with your voice. Full immersion, baptisms, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
Oddly enough, they did not believe in premillennialism, right? So no Antichrist. That was the fun part of Christianity. And here these guys were like, no, none of that's real.
Yeah, Revelations is the best part of the Bible.
Right, exactly.
The most fun.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I converted to the Norse faith at a very young age, and then I discovered Hans Holzer on In Search Of, and that sent me even deeper down the ghost hunting path. And I eventually formed my first ghost hunting group. Well, my second one really in 1983. The first one I formed in elementary school. We were called the Monster Club, and we prowled around abandoned houses and graveyards all over the place as kids. Sort of like when Stranger Things first came out. Somebody commented, "Man, I bet this is exactly what Bob Freeman's childhood was like." And they weren't too far off.
Yeah. Yeah.
A bunch of kids playing D&D and then going out looking for monsters. So it was a lot of fun. It was a good childhood.
That's funny. What's really funny listening to you tell this particular part is because I just had Michelle last night and talking about their childhood and growing up in rural Ohio, and how the school library for such a small conservative town was rich in occult books, and they named the same authors you did, and they had their elementary age ghost hunting group. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There's like the parallels between your story and Michelle's story right now. It's interesting to hear. The 70s sound like they were pretty awesome, because we got into the whole satanic panic thing of the 80s and the 90s. That conversation and how that really changed things. But yeah, the 70s sound kind of funny. Just for the record, I know nothing about the 70s. Don't let the gray hair fool you. I was born in 78.
Right. Okay. So you look at the 70s, right? And it was just tailor-made for occultists because, right. So like I was into comic books, right? So what comic books were I reading? The Son of Satan, Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, right? And they were all very heavy occult themes, Doctor Strange. And then the movies, of course, you had all the, The Omen, The Exorcist, all those great films.
Right.
And if you went to the drive-in, right, like the first time I saw The Devil Rides Out, it was like, hey, Christopher Lee, you are living my dream life.
Yeah.
So, so all those sorts of things. The 70s were just, an amazing time. Yeah. So, and I was a child through it, so it was very influential.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And you got to see real witches on TV. You tune into like Mike Douglas, and Sybil Leek would be on there, and she'd be telling you how to cast a spell.
Right.
And she was fantastic. I mean, just very personable, and she, of course, she looked like a witch.
Right.
And then of course Laurie Cabot was big then. So like my mother bought like National Enquirer or those kind of weird weekly news papers. And so she was always in there. And so it was just always witchy things going on. And
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That really is. Yeah. So you kind of well, I don't want to say converted, but you kind of took on the Norse pagan path.
I did, yes. And the thing about that is there were no books on that, right?
Right.
So you had no way, no knowledge of how to worship the gods then, right? So you just had to kind of go by intuition. And of course, being so young, basically what I did was you took what was going on in witchcraft and just kind of converted the deities, so you had to have a god and a goddess. So for me as a child, it was Thor and Sith, all right, and that just made sense. And I would eventually, convert over to Odin, later in life. But in those early days, that's kind of the way I worked it. And I did the same thing once I got involved with the Golden Dawn stuff. I stripped away a lot of the Egyptian stuff and, converted it to the appropriate Norse deities and reworked all the rituals to fit my path more. Of course, you had to work them as written at first just to figure out how to rework them. So,
yeah. Now you
but
did like your Golden Dawn stuff, like you didn't join a Golden Dawn order. Like this was
I didn't. There wasn't anything like that around here. When I went to college, I went to Ball State in Muncie, and I joined for a brief time a Wiccan coven that was had a direct link to Maxine Sanders.
okay.
Right? So that was kind of the only group workings I really dealt with. But we had a little magic group that met, and there were a couple of chaos magicians, Thalemite, and just a little hodgepodge of people that would get together and discuss philosophies and of course sit around, get high, and talk about rituals and what worked for them, what worked for the other person. We were really big. I used to read tarot cards in the local cult bookstore for drinking money, and so our big thing then was to do astral projection into the cards. So we would perform a little ritual, set a card up, and then we would enter the realm of the card and figure that kind of stuff out. So that was great times back then. So.
Did you learn that from a book or anything like that?
I think it was might have been Denning and Phillips.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah, are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
They wrote like the Foundations of High Magic and
I have some of their work.
Yeah, I was really into them in the 80s.
The reason why I'm asking is when I was a teenager and I bought my first tarot deck, and my first tarot deck was the Rider Waite. No, that was the was it the Rider Waite or was it my Thoth deck? I can't remember. So I remember when I got my Rider Waite tarot. I think maybe that was actually my second tarot deck. Just being so transfixed with the imagery that I started like doing like a meditation, like just like looking at a card and then going into the scene. And what would it be like if I projected myself into that scene that's presented on the card? What would happen? What would be the experience? And then I learned like that's like a Golden Dawn thing that they do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that when I read it through Denning and Phillips, that's because that's basically what they were doing, was aping Golden Dawn stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting. No, that's just the
yeah,
reason why I
that's
asked, just to see how
and
you
you talked
came
yeah,
with
and you
that.
talked about the deck. I mean, Pixie's artwork is just it's fantastic. I just love that deck so much.
Mhm.
I know it's the most common, it's everywhere, but I mean it really is perfect. And I say that because I've got probably 30 decks laying around this room. Um, and I love all of them,
Yeah.
but you always go back to that, the Rider Waite deck.
Yeah, no, that's true. I have the Cicero's Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot, which I really, really, really love
Yeah,
a lot. And I tend to use that the most. And then I picked up Rachel True's Intuitive Tarot. And
yeah. How about that?
oh my God, it it makes tarot reading almost like it's the most common thing that anyone can do. Like you can give the deck to an 8-year-old and they're an expert tarot reader. I find my readings with her deck are just effortless and flawless, and so like the answers and the interpretations are so in your face, not in an aggressive way, but just in a really plainly obvious way. It's a really, really, really great deck to work with. It's such a great deck to work with. Yeah,
It's it's definitely on my list.
it's good. I mean,
And
I quite like it, but I tend to work most with my Golden Dawn tarot, and your deck. I use mainly just for personal work. I
right.
find I find for not personal, like, oh, like if I want to give myself a tarot reading, but more personal work.
Right.
Uh, I find your deck for that to be just perfect,
Thank
perfect.
you. Thank you.
To really,
I was really proud of that deck, and yeah,
you
I'm
should be.
glad
I
you.
really, really like it. I really like it. It really, it's like the thought that it really gets inside you, and in ways that may be a little uncomfortable for you. But you know, sometimes you have to peek into those dark corners of yourself, and I find your deck is really good for that. Yeah, I
Thank
quite
you
like
so
it.
much.
Yeah, I'm glad I picked that up when I did. God, that was how long ago? That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I would bet 4 or 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad I snapped that up.
I'm yeah, I was really touched, very honored that you did so.
Yeah.
And it was I left it up for a year. I sold decks for a year, and then pulled it. So very limited edition,
Well, no,
So
I love it when I found that out. I'm like, that great. Like that works for me because it's limited, and when I'm 40 years from now, I might have a precious gem on my hands.
yeah, and well, yeah, it'll be worth even more because 40 years from now I won't be here. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so it'll have a little more cachet. So
yeah, exactly. So where were we? We were kind of like your college years, right? Oh,
oh
when you
yeah, well
came
actually
here,
we got up to 1983, I think, and then I got diverged.
yeah, when
So I
you were
was going
a
to explain.
teenager,
That was
sorry,
the that's my. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, that's when I formed the Night Stalkers, right? So took the name from the old Carl Kolchak show, and put together a little investigation team. And it was kind of born out of, well, you sort of, you've read it. Okay. So I kind of use part of the scenes in my novel Descendant,
Mm,
which I guess to briefly talk about my writing, most of the stuff in there is based on real experiences, right? You kind of, throw a little Doctor Strange flair into it, but yeah, a lot of that stuff is cut from real life.
Yeah.
But the incident, that I'm referring to was we had decided to do a ritual from the dreaded Necronomicon. Right. So in 83, I would have been maybe 16, 17.
Right.
Thereabouts. So there were about 20 of us that went out to this great location out near the Mississinawa River, a little place called Goose Creek. And there was okay, I guess to explain this properly, I got to tell you a little bit about the Mississinawa. All right, so the Mississinawa is a sacred river that cuts across the area that I live in. And the Army Corps of Engineers, in their infinite wisdom, came in and flooded the town of Somerset and made a reservoir. So every fall, the water is drained out of it, leaving behind the wreckage and ruins of what spent most of the time underneath a lake.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this road that goes back and down, and once had been a bridge crossing this wide creek. Now the bridge is long gone. It's just a ruined road, normally underwater. So we go out there one evening, and we're going to perform this ritual. It is a completely overcast night. It was the night of a full moon, but you could see no moon at all. We park at the top of the hill, begin walking down, and as soon as we get to the bottom where the stretch of road is, the clouds part, and somebody says, "Oh my God, there's a pentagram around the moon." And you look up, and yes, there's a 5-point star where the clouds have opened up around the moon, and everybody's freaking out. And we're seeing this scene where all these dead trees are reaching up out of the water, kind of stretching like spindly fingers towards the sky. And on the road where we're going to make our magic circles are thousands of dead fish. Somebody else makes the comment, "Wow, isn't the fish the symbol of Jesus?" And so everybody, again, everybody's amped up and freaking out. So we begin, we form 3 magic circles, and me and 2 of my colleagues are in one, and my friend is doing an incantation, the Watcher, and he fouls it up. He trips over some words, and he becomes possessed by some unknown spirit, begins ranting and raving, frothing, speaking in strange tongues that, we couldn't recognize. Of course, we're all teenagers.
Yeah.
All the people that are in the protective circle are just, they're beside themselves. And me and this individual begin having a conversation. And we're walking on the opposite sides of each other around this circle of our friends, and I'm on one side, he's completely opposite. And this girl, as I'm passing by, she reaches over and she whispers, "Oh my God." And he, from the other side, no way he could have heard that. And he says, "Your God cannot help you now." And it's like they're screaming, and we keep moving around and having this debate, this philosophical debate. And then as passing around again, there's a guy there, and he's holding a kind of like a nightclub, and he drops it, and it rolls across the circle, and he reaches down and he picks it up, and he goes, "Oh, I broke the circle." And he's like, "Just stay calm, right?" And we move around, and all of a sudden, that guy says, the circle's protection is no more. And he jumps into the circle. Everybody screams, everybody runs. And yeah, so it was, and it just got stranger from there. So yeah, that was like I said, 1983, the height of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
So
You
when we,
said about that story on your blog, didn't you?
I have, yeah,
Okay,
right, yeah,
okay. Because well, first of all, I feel like I know this area that you're talking about so well, just because of your
right.
stories on your blog and of course in your books, which I love. So you just really build that area and you really make it come alive. And yeah, I quite like it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was weird because like a couple days later, I went to the Converse Library, and they had this thing where you could go up and put books in through a little slot, and then you could go through that box, and it'd be like a bring one, take one kind of thing, right? And I'm there, and I'm looking in this box, and the book, the Necronomicon, right? Here it is. Same book.
Yeah.
It's even got dried blood inside of it.
Oh, God.
All right. So that's from the fish, right? But so this book, who my friend had that night, that he recited it from, he took this and he hurled it out into the water. And this book was laying in that box at the Converse Library. And it is it's that book. There's no way it could have gotten there.
Yeah.
Right? He hurled this out away, and a couple days later, there it was. The same book. It's got his name in it.
Oh.
Got the dried blood in it. It's his book.
Wow.
And yeah, so and to bring the, so we go back to school, and of course the people that were spectators there are telling everybody
Right.
about what happened. So by the end of the day, we were sacrificing children.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
It had blown up into this big nasty thing. So that week I was supposed to be inducted into the National Honor Society. And the day of the induction, I get called to the principal's office, and I'm informed that, well, word has come to us about certain events, and so we don't think that you are of moral standing to be inducted into the Honor Society. And I'm like, oh, you're kidding me, right? And so luckily I had a couple of teachers that came down and stood up for me, and so I was actually inducted. But it was a big drama, and it was something else.
I love it.
It was something to live through, let me tell you.
Yeah. I love it.
Especially as a teenager. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, and exactly. It was hilarious. So and frightening, and then hilarious after the fact. So but it's a fun story to share.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, but as scary as that is, because of course, anytime I shouldn't say anytime you experience anything scary, but quite often when you experience something scary, the strength of that fright kind of dissipates, and it's like, let's experience something like that again,
Right, yeah.
And it's like, let's what else can we get up to?
Right, yeah. Exactly. So,
which I guess also kind of ties into your occult detective stuff as well. Because I mean, if that didn't scare you straight, it's that that experience. It's almost like it's either going to scare you straight or just you're all in. You're either you're all out or you're all in.
Yeah, you're deep diving at that point. And that's exactly what I did. And what I realized was, as a paranormal investigator, and I watched the shows, and Michelle would back me up on this, is I think a big problem is not enough paranormal investigators are immersed in the occult world, because you need that arsenal right? Because you never know what kind of entities you might run into, what kind of dealings, and you've got, all these different, religious sects and stuff that you might be interacting with, with the spirit, or more nefarious entities that might be tied to a place. So it's important to learn, as much about, like, particularly in my area, to know as much about the native lore as possible, because you're going to run into those type of spirits a lot.
Right.
It pays to know all the secret societies and all the inner workings of that stuff. I deal a lot with, like, Oddfellows
Yeah.
buildings, Freemasonry, all that, those sort of things. So you got to kind of have all that in your bag of tricks.
Yeah. And even, my biggest pet peeve is, oh, it's a demon, it's a demon. And,
It's always
for anyone that, practices magic and is working with spirits and whatnot, even like a benevolent, helpful spirit, when you invoke them, you could have an unsettled feeling. It's not like, it's not warm and fuzzy, so just
right.
because the feeling that you have is in this room is unsettling, it's not, you shouldn't automatically go, oh well, it's obviously a demon because I don't feel comfortable, so it
Right.
must
Well,
be a demon.
yeah, most people are coming from the Judeo-Christian background,
Mhm.
and so they default to that,
Yeah.
that mythos. So, I mean, it's understandable. I host groups at least monthly, sometimes more, and yeah, that I see it a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but and that was it. The other thing that kind of bothers me somewhat. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, long before there was reality TV.
Right.
So I can remember the first time I ran across other ghost hunters. I never, ever ran into other people when I was out in these places. And it was in the early 2000s, and I was out at a place that they call Okefenokee, which is this great area of forest. There's a river that comes through there. I've got a lot of great EVP photographs of full-bodied apparitions out there. And it's a great location.
Mhm.
But so I'm out there investigating one night, and I run into these guys that are passing through the woods, and they had K2 meters, and I'd never seen a K2 meter before. So I say, hey, so what are you guys up to? And they, oh, we're out here hunting ghosts. Oh, really? Yeah. So what's this equipment you got here? And I said, oh yeah. They explained a little bit, and they said, well, you've seen ghost hunters, right? And I was like, yeah, no, what's that? See, because that's another thing you should know about where we live here. Back then, anyway, we didn't have cable TV.
Right.
Right? So you're stuck to local channels and such. So I had no idea it existed. And they were explaining it to me. Oh, well, I'll have to check that out. And so here they are, K2 meters. The next weekend, I'm out at a place called Hobbitland. I'll explain that a little bit here
Mhm.
later. But there's another group of people, different people. They also have K2 meters and stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And so what I quickly learned is all of a sudden there's all these people investigating, and it just blew up
Right.
because of that show. And everybody investigates the exact same way.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, and so I have these people coming through, and anytime there's a new toy on TV, these people are coming in with it, and it's your ghost boxes and thermometers and all the different stuff. I still pretty much hunt old school. I use analog recording. I use I prefer divining rods.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't really play with the toys too much. I don't think they're very accurate, to be honest. I think yeah, it's a lot of bells and whistles, and but I don't see the value in them. I just don't trust the science.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I have no experience with paranormal investigations or whatnot, so it's hard for me to have an informed opinion. I would I know myself well enough to think that if I were to do paranormal investigating, I would probably be more old school because I would be doing it um, for the experience,
right,
as opposed to trying to, quote unquote, prove the
right,
existence of ghosts, or to say, oh well, this thing is powered by batteries, it's going off, therefore I'm doing science, which that's
right,
not
right,
how
right.
science works. I mean, if I'm
And,
using a calculator to add 2 + 2, I'm not doing science just because the
right.
calculator is battery powered.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning to disparage the people that are out there doing this work. I mean, I understand, I get it. It just doesn't work for me. And like you said, and this is something I figured out a long time ago, probably into the 90s, is that there's no amount of evidence that I can collect and show to a non-believer
Right.
would convince them that it was real.
Yeah.
Right? They will rationalize why it's not, so
Yeah.
that they maintain their worldview.
Yeah.
I have video of full body apparitions walking in a hallway, clearly another person, and people see it. And if you are a believer, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it looks like. If you're a non-believer, then they're, oh well, that's just a person, and why did they disappear all of a sudden? Well, it's the glitch in the camera. They'll find some way
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
rationalize.
Yeah.
And so I quit trying to convince people a long time ago. I'm in it for what it does for me,
Yeah.
and I enjoy the interaction with other spirits. And Yeah, and I like investigating the history of places.
Hmm.
I was an anthropology major in college, so people and places are very important to me. I like to delve into the story behind it. So
Right. Right. Yeah. That's I kind of feel, your position there. And I mean, talk about like you're not gonna, no matter what kind of evidence you have, you're not gonna convince a non-believer. You're not even gonna convince the science community, because it wasn't the science community that did it. If the
right,
science community was finally, a little less uptight, be like, okay, let's try this out, then they'd be like, oh, guess what we just proved, you know,
right.
with the
Now,
same evidence and the same equipment that you just used, you know?
and there are some sciency things that that I do like. I had a guy that came to a location that I host people in quite frequently, and he brought dry ice machines, flooded the place with smoke, and had laser grids going off, and you could see things passing through the smoke, moving. It's moving. Shapes are moving around it. Um, that's stuff like that. I get it, and,
Mhm.
and and science works
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're thinking it through. But uh, you know, ghost boxes, that's a little iffy. It's, randomly scrolling through radio stations. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that's I that made me think of the most recent investigation I did. We were sitting in this ballroom of this old Oddfellows Lodge, and I'm having a conversation with my friend. We're sitting in chairs in the middle of the room. There's two other guys there. One guy who claims to be a demonologist, who works with a Catholic priest up north. Seemed like a very nice guy, very earnest guy, but he's got a laptop and he's playing a Catholic exorcism over his laptop. and full choir. It's like 6
Okay.
people doing this ritual. And sitting near him was another guy who was just doing spot checks with a thermometer, around the room. And as I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the guy, and I see a shadow figure manifest behind him, and it raises up behind him. And I called out to him and said, "Hey, there's a shadow figure right behind you." And he jumps up, and the shadow figure starts moving along the wall to the south. And then it disappears. And at that exact moment, my friend and I suddenly both gasped as we just got hit with this cold spot, right? It just descended on us. And I mean, it just chilled us to the bone. And with the thermo, he's shooting us with it. And he says, the temperature just dropped 20 degrees.
Wow.
Like in a split second.
Right.
It just, and it's just like, I'm looking at my buddy, and he's like, his eyes are all wide. It took his breath, and it was, I'd never felt anything that intense before. I mean, I've been, experienced hundreds of cold spots, but never where the temperature just dropped that dramatic. I mean, it just, it was really intense. And that was just here recently. So yeah, I still get a thrill from it. That's for sure. And I can still be surprised.
Yeah.
Doing this for over 40 years.
Well, that's kind of the point, though, too, right? Is, I mean, to still be able to have that sense of wonder.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, doing what we do, right? So we deal with spirits and God forms and the like, in ritual, right? So we experience these things in a very personal way, in a very ritualized space.
Yeah.
So when you go out into the wild, where these things are just kind of out there, untamed, roaming about a location, and then trying to make a connection with them, so there's a bit of a difference, but we have an advantage.
Yeah.
People like you and I, because we've experienced that, in a very clinical setting, in ways.
Well, it's very controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wish there were more ghost hunters that were occultists. Michelle, great. I wish Michelle investigated more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, she has these great talents, right? So,
well, we were talking about that after we finished the interview, and after we finished recording, we were talking about paranormal investigation. And like I said, like I have no, like, I see paranormal investigation as purely entertainment, just because I get it from television shows.
Right.
I don't go out and do it. So I don't really have like a full comprehension of what from the moment you get there to the moment you leave, type of thing. Like I jokingly said to her, like, the closest I've ever been to a paranormal investigation, I had a dream one night that you, Michelle, and myself were at a location, and there was like a spirit that we were trying to contact, but she was too like weak to be able to make contact with Michelle. So we had to do, the three of us had to do like this energy raising ritual. Like I literally like whipped out a floor cloth, ceremonial circle on the floor cloth, and we did this like elaborate ritual, and we fed her this energy, and she's like, oh, I'm trapped by this demon. So then we had to do like this elaborate it like invoking the demon to then be able to banish it. And I woke up, and I was, because it was so lifelike, and I woke up and I was like, oh, son of a bitch, that wasn't real. Yeah. So that's the closest that's the closest I've been to a paranormal investigation. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a fantastic dream. And yeah, I wish I were there, right?
Yeah.
So that would have been a great experience to have. I love
Well, we
that.
had a great time, the three of us. I mean, we had a great
Yeah.
time. So, be at ease. You had fun that night. So.
That's great.
But yeah, no, it was one of the, you have those dreams sometimes and you wake up and you're like, why isn't that real?
Right. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
one of them. Yeah, that was one of them. There was a fourth person there. I think it was a guy. He was like playing around with equipment or something, but really it was like the three of us, like, and like I literally, with the floor cloth and it unrolled and and the tools came out and we're like, let's do this.
Right.
It was something else. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Maybe someday we'll get the chance. I,
Mm.
I'd love to have you at the Oddfellows building sometime. That's
You
just
know, because of my love of the Midwest so much, and because I think you're fantastic. I was actually literally thinking about this just the other week. I'm like, I really should make my way down to Indiana for a trip. I love long distance driving, especially in the Midwest. Like it's flat, like up here, to drive from like here to Toronto. Yeah,
right.
drive through the Canadian Shield and it's twisty and down and cliff and da 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 da. So it's not, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's not relaxing like, when you're driving through Oklahoma on I-35 and it's just straight. It's just
Right. Yeah.
a straight line. So I like long distance driving and it would just be like a relaxing drive. And yeah, so that would be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to go to that Oddfellows Hall of
Yeah.
yours.
You would love it. Yeah. And there's yeah, there's bedrooms there. Yeah, spend the weekend and yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. That would be really, really, really cool.
We could probably get Michelle to come over. She's only probably 4 hours away. Heck, the Newkirk's
Yeah.
only
Oh,
4 hours.
yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all close. I mean,
Yeah.
we could have a little mini convention.
Yeah. 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 I know that would be a lot of fun. You guys are like here. Well, Southern Ontario, it's pretty populated. Where you can go, you can hop from town to town to town, and it's really, everything's really accessible. But like with most of Canada, it's like wherever you are, you're not near anything else. You know,
Right.
I mean, we're a huge landmass, and we're so underpopulated. We have like 37 or 39 million people.
Right.
So there's wherever you are, you're never close to anything else, basically.
Well, there's got to be advantages to that, right? So like there's no energies that are intruding upon what you're doing.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, it's you can get away from people, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it's probably not hard for you to get someplace where you don't have all that light pollution. Right, because
Yeah.
even here it's hard to see the night sky. It's so, and I guess that comes from, and you may have seen this when you were in Texas, right? But when I was out in the Southwest, in New Mexico and Arizona, Utah, when you were out in the desert, the sky is a totally different experience.
Mhm.
I couldn't believe it the first time I was out there, and it was just, I don't know, it was awe inspiring,
Yeah.
just to look so deep into that blackness
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see this, and when you're out there, I mean, you can see every satellite that's passing overhead.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and you realize how much we've lost as a people. That I wish we could just get everybody. Hey, everybody, just turn your lights off. Just let's shut everything down for a little bit.
Yeah.
And look up, and that wonder that is lost because of technology and a fear of the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we camp, and our camp's about a 45-minute drive out of town on a little lake, and it's gated, so you can't just drive in there, so it's very private, and it's amazing because at night, like that sky and the Milky Way, and it's glorious. It's glorious.
Really is.
So, yeah, so it's not there, there are benefits. I mean, it's not hard. It's not a big trek or any sort of effort or planning to be able to experience stuff like that. We get the Northern Lights up here, which
Right.
which are beautiful and can be quite dramatic at times. So yeah, there's benefits, of course, but I just there's a um not a like a bit like a remoteness that, because I got so used to, like, when I was living in southern Ontario and living in Texas, like I can just hop in my car when I lived in Houston and drive half an hour or an hour, and I'm in a different place, and things are just more accessible and whatnot. So it's there, well, just like anything else in life, there's pluses and minuses.
Well, yeah, and Texas it's a weird place, because
Oh, I love it.
you're in an urban center, and you're like you said, you drive out of that and get out to one of those small towns. It's like a different world,
Complete.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Houston, it's fairly liberal. Um, you don't have to drive that far out of Houston to experience, stereotypical Texas, and then, like I said, I also lived in Austin, and Austin is so much more liberal and artsy and whatnot.
right,
And Austin feels like the geography feels more like Southern California or California than it does Texas. And with Austin being so small, like it's less than 1 million people, it's just that much easier to get out of the city, and you're immediately in stereotypical Texas kind of,
right, right.
yeah, everything. Oh, I loved living down there. I loved it so much. It was my favorite place ever to live.
Well,
I
in Indiana, you'll have Indianapolis and Gary, right, which are kind of urban, liberal,
mhm.
and then every place else is, very conservative,
Yeah, yeah.
very conservative. So, I mean, where I live, I live just on the outskirts of a town of about 1,200 people, and if I go to a town with 10,000 people, I feel, kind of claustrophobic. I just,
Yeah.
but so it's a very conservative area, and I kind of stand out a little bit,
Right, right.
but I'm used to it. So,
Yeah. Hey,
but
it's
you just
worth
don't
it.
run into, you don't get that kind of integration with other people, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very white bread America,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. Yeah.
which is, you know, the diversity is not on the agenda in these kind of places.
Right.
But thank goodness for the internet, right? So
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
yeah,
Well,
but you never,
it's just like anything else. You got to take the good with the bad, and
right,
there's pluses and minuses to every life experience. I mean, there's certainly, minuses. As much as I love Houston and I'd move back, and like that's the only city where I would move that I've previously lived that I'd move back in a second. But there's certainly downsides, of course, So
right, yeah,
you weigh the two, and you make your decisions.
yeah. You make your little world work for you,
Yeah.
and you know what, you change people that you can change, and you every little change like that, I think, has much more weight behind it, so yeah, that's what you have to do in life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
be you, and hopefully that influences others.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So one thing I want to talk to you about a lot, just because I'm a big fan of them, is your books, your writing. I want to know how that started, the writing. And
Yeah, yeah, that's a really that's a great story. Growing up, I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I still do. I
yeah,
still play. Role playing games, I should say, not just D&D. But so storytelling was very natural for me. Growing up. So I was usually the dungeon master, or the the person instigating and controlling the games.
mm,
And I wrote some plays and some short stories as a kid, but when I went to college, I was mainly a poet and a songwriter. So I played a little guitar, and that was kind of where I thought I was at as a creative outlet. Well, then fast forward to about 2000, and I got married to this wonderful woman named Kim. And
your book is beautiful, by the way.
thank you so
She's
much.
beautiful,
Yeah,
and her
she
cheekbone.
really is. Thank you. I don't know how she ended up with me, but
Yeah,
we worked together in a bookstore.
yeah.
That's where we met. Okay, she
Consider
was my
yourself
boss.
lucky.
Yeah. So because she was my boss, I had to leave that job. I became a manager. I had a Books a Million in another town, and the week we were to get married. They and I, of course, for months they knew this was coming. They come to me and they say, "Hey Bob, you're going to have to work the day of your wedding." I'm like, whoa, what? No, no, no. I've got it off. Well, yeah, but the co-manager, she has a bridge club thing in Fort Wayne, so she's not going to be able to cover. Yeah, I've had this off for like 6 months. Oh, sorry. So I quit. So the week I get married, I don't have a job, and so I'm looking for work, and I'm feeling kind of depressed. Starting this new life with this wonderful woman, and I'm out of work. So she says, "Well, hey, you were always talking about being a writer. Why don't you write when I leave for work? And then when I get home, I'll read what you wrote." So that's what happened. So for the next 3 months, well, whenever she would leave for work, I would sit down and I started writing Shadows over Somerset,
Mm-hmm.
which is the story about werewolves and vampires and immortal swordsmen and all this kind of a conglomeration of all these things that I loved, and it was a lot of fun.
Set in your area that you live in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the town of Somerset, which is
yeah.
just up the road, right? So yeah, so it was a great bonding experience for us because she would come home from work, we would sit, she would read it, we would discuss it. So I knocked that book out in about 3 months, and I thought it was pretty good. So I started looking for publishers, and really shortly after that, it got picked up by Dimension Studios, which was a film company. They made like a whole slew of like the Underworld movies, right? So yep, so a whole slew of like horror type films. And they had it in development for like 3 years, and they kept having me like do changes. Like they say, "Hey, could you kind of age down the cast? We're thinking something like Dawson's Creek, kind of." You're right. So I'm redoing the book, and like, what are they doing to this thing, right? So then after 3 years, they had a movie come out called Cursed, which was a werewolf film with Christina Ricci and some other people, but it did not do well at all. It bombed, and so they stopped development on that book. So it got put back in my hands, and it was a mess, right? Because I kept having to make changes, and I was so new to it, I didn't always save the original stuff.
Okay.
So I reassembled it as best I could, and eventually found a small press publisher that put it out, and it sold really well, far better than I dreamed it would. And so that's how that happened, just because I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
And
I can't believe that your first book ended up in a production company. Like, that's incredible.
yeah, okay, so that was just a chance happening. This I'm a big comic book fan, right? So I was on a John Byrne message board forum that John Byrne himself was putting on, and I met a guy who was the head of research and development for Dimension on that board, because he's a big Byrne fan, and he had just offhand said, I'm always looking for stuff. I said, hey, how about if I send you my book? And oh yeah, sure. And he loved it, right? So I was like, wow, yeah, that's great, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be my big break. And just like that, hit a home run right out of the gate. And then of course, like typical Hollywood fashion, right? It falls apart in 3 years, and I got nothing out of it really. So, but like I said, the book sold well after that. And there was a sequel, Keepers of the Dead, which when I wrote that book, I had a couple different jobs. I was working in a warehouse, and I was working in a computer tech center. And so I didn't have a lot of time. And I had a new son. My sister-in-law had moved in with us after the death of my wife's mother. She was, like, I don't know, 11 or 12. So a lot of responsibility on me, right? But I had a successful book, and I had to follow it up. So what I would do is I would spend a little time with the family, and then when they all went to bed, I would go upstairs and start writing. And I would write for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I would go down and sleep for about 2 hours, and then get up and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
So for about 4 months, I was sleeping 2 hours a night writing this book. And it was well worth it,
Yeah.
And I was younger, so get going without sleep. I was used to that from college. It's long nights where I was no stranger to. But yeah, I was really happy with that book. But the book that I was meant to write was Descendant, and and that one that just came about for me writing short stories about these characters, Landon Connors and Wolf and Crow, and and I just started pulling all these stories in from investigations and kind of weaving them into this elaborate story. And it did well. People seem to really enjoy it when they can get their hands on it.
I love Descendant. So I read it the first time when it first came out. Then I reread Firstborn. And for those that don't know, it's a collection of your stories. But a lot of what happened in Firstborn and some of the characters made more sense. Everything tied in together really, really cleanly. Now, what I have a bad habit of, I'm really bad with people's names.
Right.
And when I'm reading fiction, if for some reason I decide a character isn't really relevant, I don't really pay attention to their name. So I did that with some of the characters in like some in Descendant, like the kids that were dying. So I kind of pieced together as I was reading Descendant, I'm like, okay, which one was this one and whatnot, just because I just have that bad habit with names. So I reread Descendant again the second time and enjoyed it just that much more than I did the first time, which I loved it the first time.
Right, because you learned who they were in Firstborn.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to everyone's name, so I didn't get confused and forget who and da 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 da. So when I read it the second time, I was able to just enjoy it just that much more. And it's such a great book. Oh my God, it's such a great book. The way it just, because the first part and then you get into the storyline and how at the end, how it just all comes together. It's an incredible book. It really.
Right, because it seems like the first part has nothing to do with, right? And so that was, for me, that was very satisfying, bringing that all together. It's interesting how Firstborn came about. So I wrote Descendant first, right? And so this English publisher, which is defunct now, but so they were really interested in the book. They wanted to publish it. And so they get the rights. I signed the contracts, and the guy who was running the press comes to me and he says, it'd be really neat if we kind of, leading up to the publication of the novel, if we had some short stories that we could release kind of that would lead into the novel. And so that's when I got the idea. Well, you know what? Make them like little chapters leading up to the story, and tie it in on how they all got involved in it. And it really just fell into place. It was a brilliant idea on this guy's part. Unfortunately he ripped me off and a bunch of other people, but I can't begrudge him too much, because that probably never would have happened without his impetus. So so then I started kind of looking at all these other short stories that I'd written about other things, and I realized, oh wait, this is all one big story. You go back to that first story in Firstborn, the one about Aleister Crowley, right, and I realized, oh, that's the woman that's in Descendant. That's her. And it's like, I didn't make the connection, but I realized I was writing about her. That's her origin story. Right. So, as soon as I realized that that's what I had been doing, even subconsciously, it was easy to put that book together. And unfortunately, they're all out of print right now.
That's really unfortunate, because people need to buy that book because it's so good.
So I'm going to self-publish them with some additions. And so probably by the time people watch this interview, they'll be available again. So that's my plan.
Excellent. Now, do you have any plans for books centered around Landon Connors?
Definitely. I've got some things that are written, things that follow the book that follows Descendant, which is Born Again. That is very Connor centric. That brings him into that story, right? So because he was kind of on the fringe, right? You see him through Firstborn. He's mentioned a little bit in Descendant, and then so that's him coming into that story in the next book. So
I'm excited about that.
And then there's the plan is after that would be Afterbirth, which would kind of take it even further and wrap that up. So so Connors is the guy I like writing the most about. My son, who's also a writer, he's 17. He's published 2 novels. He's got, he's been writing a fantasy series now that he hopes to find a publisher for. So he's far and away more advanced than I was at his age as far as this stuff.
Well, he has a good example. He has a good example for a writer, so that's a little different, but that's exciting.
Right. So we sit around and we talk writing, and and we were talking the other day, and I kind of had all these Landon Connor stories kind of percolating in my head, and we started talking about some of that, and, you know, because there's just so many sides of him that I haven't been able to show yet.
Right.
And so that all just came bubbling up, and so yeah, it'd be nice to get back to that. I've not had the opportunity to write much here lately, the last couple of years, really. So it'll be nice to dive back into that. The thing I've been working on here recently is for a long time I was working on an occult detective role-playing game.
Yeah.
That utilized my stories as the backdrop mythos, so people could like adventure within that realm.
And that's how we met, incidentally, because I can't remember how I came across Occult Detective RPG, but that led me to following you on Twitter, and I
Right.
contacted you about it. And so that's how we met, and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And
That
got
was,
your
yep.
tarot deck, and, you know, bought all your books and whatnot. But it really was that Occult Detective RPG that brought this relationship together.
Well, I spent a lot of money on a prototype, you know, with boards and miniatures and all that stuff. So yeah, when I published those pictures and you and others saw it, people were, you know, drooling all over it.
Yes.
But it's a very expensive venture, you know, to get into. So
Yeah.
I realized that I was not going to be able to publish this on my own. So I've been trying to find people. What's that?
Is that a dead project?
It's not dead. No, I'm still working on it, and it's if I get to a position where I could bring it to Kickstarter and maybe get it going that way, that's a plan.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay.
but yeah, so the problem is you really need people with money to be behind something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't do it because I wanted to make money. So but I really would like to have people out there playing it. But here lately, I've been working on a project for another individual that is a authentic magic role-playing game that is not dissimilar from the occult detective, but it comes at it from more of a, not the detective aspect of it, but from an actual occultist that is part of a lodge. It's called Invisible College.
Right.
I've been working on that. Basically, my job is to do all the artwork for it, do all the graphic design, and put it together. So I've been working on that here, you know, the last few months to get it going. And there's another RPG that I'm working with. It's a really huge intellectual property. It's gonna be huge. So we're writing that, my son and I, for them, and they'll be taking it to Kickstarter. I can't say who it is, but it's a big deal, you know. Sure. And so that I hope was going to lead to Occult Detective being published. So,
Okay.
So yeah, don't give up.
Yeah, it's not dead. It's just shelved right now until until it's not shelved. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I need to make a name for myself in that gaming community, so that I can get this thing off the ground.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen you post a bit about the Invisible College. So that looks intriguing.
You would love it.
I bet. Yeah, I bet.
It's because, I mean, basically it breaks down. I mean, this guy did a lot of work on breaking down in game terms, you know, using the Kabbalah, you know, Enochian calls, all this stuff. You're doing ritual in the game setting, you know, and there's a little bit of a spy element, you know, kind of like it seems a lot like, you know, the Devil's Rides Out kind of thing. So it's pretty neat.
Okay. Is it like, is the setting like contemporary?
It can be whatever setting you want. You know, it would be up to the game master.
Okay.
You know, on when it. So it could take place in the 20s if you wanted it to, or earlier. So everything's generic enough that you could make it fit in any time period.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. And when is there a sort of like a hoped for release?
Oh
Date?
yeah. It should be available probably next month. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's really close to being finished.
Oh,
That's why I've been devoting all my time to it to get it wrapped up,
yeah.
and it's looking really good. It's really coming together. So, and
Awesome.
I think people will really dig it. Like I said, the first time I play tested it, we set it around Boleskine, right? So yeah, you got the Golden Dawn, right? So we were kind of doing that War of the Magicians,
Oh
with
yeah, yeah. Okay.
with Yates and Crowley, when they're battling over the Golden Dawn. So yeah, there are elements of that was in that first playtest. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. So
Oh, that's
all of that is potential to to work with. So
okay. That sounds exciting. Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's like I said, it's been a lot of fun to work on. It's right up my alley. It's
Yeah.
so I look forward to people having a chance to look into it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't write it, but my art's all over it, and it's been a challenge. Because yeah, just putting a book together, like it's going to be well over 400 pages.
Okay.
Yeah, so and like seasoned occultists will recognize pretty quick that things were changed within it. So as like for instance, the like all the names of the demons are slightly altered.
Okay.
Their
Right.
appearances are slightly altered so that we're not accused of teaching people to perform actual, but it's close enough that you'll get it, if you want to change it to be more accurate, you can. It's all, just a
Yeah.
little fudge with a letter here or there just to keep it clean. So
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you're gonna
well,
get
I mean Crowley and Mathers and you know they did all that in their books too. I mean,
yeah.
they altered things so that only the initiated would be able to perform a ritual properly.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's smart. You don't want that kind of stuff falling into the wrong hands. Although of late, I think people have you know been less concerned about those sort of things. But growing up, you were always running into, why isn't this working? Oh, it's because he changed this, and you're supposed to be smart enough to figure it out.
Right.
Uh, so,
Yeah.
yeah, always a challenge. So
Well, they weren't writing. I don't think they were writing for us, like for our time period, how we're all doing this on our own and buying the books and trying to make it work. Like they were writing for other initiates,
right, exactly.
in a way. I mean,
They knew. Yeah.
Crowley did a lot of his, like, the equinox, of course, was more accessible to the general public and whatnot. But I mean, at the end of the day, like they're writing for other, their contemporaries, basically. They were
Right,
they weren't doing, Magic 101 for,
right.
whoever was interested in it.
So there's an interesting question. So how were you introduced to Crowley? Like, when did you first hear about him? What led you to his writings?
I don't know. I mean, so I'm not into like Thelema. I'm not a follower of Crowley. I find him interesting as a individual, of course.
Right.
I can't even tell you how many biographies on him. I have, just because, and I mean, it's the same story, but it's his story's interesting enough to read it over and over again. And when you have different authors writing the same story, they'll bring in their own biases. So the tone of his story is different. So it's
Right.
it's interesting to read the, you know, people that don't look so favorably on Crowley, their
Right.
piece on him versus like Richard Kaczynski's Perturabo,
Love
which
it. Yeah.
is the best. Like if you want the best biography, definitely get Perturabo, because it's so fleshed out, and it gives the good and the bad in a fairly neutral way, you know.
Right. Yeah. Here it is, warts and all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, I don't remember how I first became aware of Crowley. It would have been through books um that I read, owned, and whatnot. I remember I was very, very young when I bought 777, and I was buying a lot of books on Golden Dawn. Um, I have a first edition of the complete Golden Dawn System of Magic by Regardi. It's a
All right.
huge, huge, huge hardcover. I mean, it's massive.
Oh, yeah.
And I recently found out that it sells for like $1,200 US.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
right now.
Yeah.
I paid $120 Canadian for it, and that would have been probably, I would say, 20 years ago or so, 18, 20 years ago. So I used to buy a lot of books on the Golden Dawn, and I mean, as a teenager, you could make heads or tails of those books.
Oh,
And
yeah. Right.
yeah, it
Well,
is,
how do you pronounce any of it? Right. So yeah,
no,
I was totally lost. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
But it was interesting going back after, lots of study and lots of years, and go back and you crack open those books for the first time in 10, 15 years, and it's almost like you learned a new language without realizing it, because
right.
now you crack open these books and you understand the references and what this means and the symbolism, and all of a sudden this whole world opens up to you, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can do this. And I ended up getting the Cicero's self-initiation into the Golden Dawn, and
Oh,
I worked through that more or less successfully. I mean, I have lots of conversations with my friend Fred RC about, self-initiation, and, you know, that whole discussion and debate, and, you know, the positives and negatives of that book, in particular, Cicero's self-initiation book. And, so I mean, I just, muddle along as best as I can with
right.
the Golden Dawn system, as opposed to, like, I didn't go the Crowley route. Um, why, I don't know. I think I still have some biases where, you know, I see Crowley as interesting, but slightly distasteful. You know,
Yeah.
I think
I get that. Yeah.
I no matter how liberal and open and creative and experimental and kink you are, you can still have some, puritanical views, based on our society, and if your upbringing involves Christianity. So I still kind of look at Crowley as a little distasteful, in a way where I'm like, I wouldn't um uh I just wouldn't, go the Thelema route.
Yeah.
A
He's the kind of guy that if you would have met him, he'd be interesting to talk with at like a dinner party. But you're definitely not going to go perform a ritual with the guy.
Yeah, yeah,
You're not getting an intimate setting with him for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I get
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how I came out, I honestly I can't remember, but I've certainly devoured a lot of Crowleyanity. His writings are interesting. His poetry is hit or miss. I mean, some of his poetry is brilliant.
yeah,
Most of it is complete garbage. Moonchild isn't a well-written book, but the story's good. I mean,
yeah.
if you have
I'm a fan. Yeah,
yeah,
that's I'm
if
a
you
fan
have
of.
a good writer to polish up that story, it would be an excellent book. And then, like I said, I don't know how many biographies on Crowley I have, just because his story's fascinating. And I love biographies. I love people. I love learning about people. But to have all these biographies on like people involved in the occult, it fires my imagination, and it gives some inspiration for like my short stories and all that. So I tend to eat up as much of that biographical information on occultists as much as I can, really.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you completely. It's, yeah, I discovered him through Jimmy Page, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
it was in the '70s, big Led Zeppelin fan,
Yeah.
huge Jimmy Page fan, and so when so you follow that whole symbology, you find out, oh well, he owns, what they always said, well, he owns. Uh, Back then we said Crowley,
Right.
Crowley's Castle. It's like, well, what is this? Who's this guy? And so you start looking into it, and yeah, that's kind of how I found my way through, was through rock music, right? So
Hmm.
Stevie Nicks was another one that kind of led you into witchcraft,
Right.
so yeah, pop music in the '70s in particular was very influential in pulling people in. So
Yeah.
and you were talking earlier about like self-initiation and stuff that made me think of the Scott Cunningham books were really big for me
Yeah.
when those came out. It was just such a breath of fresh air. It's so different from all the other stuff that I'd been reading. Is very, very much more intimate. And
Right.
I love his writing style. Just so that whole, all those Llewellyn books in the late '80s and '90s were just great for pulling people in.
Yeah.
I've still got them all on my shelves back here. It's
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of books where, I think about them now and I cringe. Um,
yeah,
but they're not going to be, I'm not removing them from my shelves. I'm not throwing them out, burning them, giving them away, selling them, like,
right.
because books, I love my books, um, but yeah, some of those books you think back and you're like, "Ugh."
Well, we've
But
come a long way from then.
we've we've
Yeah, right.
we've come a long way, but I see this a lot on social media because people back in the day loved to bash Silver Ravenwolf and her book.
Right, right.
And
Who is a lovely person.
I'm sure she is. I mean, I don't know her. I've never met her. Some of the stuff I have four of her books. Um, they weren't formative for me. My formative years were a few years before she started publishing, or either that or before I was, aware of her and her books. I don't know, because this was pre-internet. So if they weren't at the bookstore, they didn't exist really.
Right. Right.
Um, so but I do have some of her books. There's some good that you can take out of them and some cringy stuff. But as cringe, I mean, DJ Conway, I mean, most of her stuff is cringe.
Yep.
Though her Flying Without a Broom was really instrumental in me being able to astral travel as a teenager. But if so, I see this come up quite often on social media. with Silver Rainbow Wolf in particular, so many people being like, yeah, but they may be cringe now, but they brought a whole generation to
Right.
witchcraft and Wicca and neo-paganism and magic, and you know, they're
And
they're not harmful books. They're not going to send kids to Satan, and a teenager's not going to accidentally summon a demon because of Silver and Ravenwolf's books. They're harmless.
right.
And they played such a big role for a generation that so most books have value. And it's so easy to look at something in history or historical figures with modern eyes and see
Right.
cringe. You know what I mean? Um,
Look, magic and witchcraft in particular has evolved so much,
yeah,
from when I was first involved with it. When it, it just with was very sex oriented,
yeah,
very uh, very gender centric. um and then the Dianic started coming along, and just everything. And I'm old enough that I watched that evolution
right.
and had to relearn things along the way, where and so a lot of the old guard, that's still around, that are still kind of caught in that the way it was. And I'll be honest with you, I miss a lot of that stuff. There was just, but because it's a part of my childhood,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And that was the dominant form then. And now it's a lot more commercialized. And but there's just, there was good stuff then, cringe stuff also, and you get that kind of now too. And
oh, of
you,
course,
so
absolutely.
you look at you yeah, you look at this stuff, and you just take, okay, I can use this, I'll set this aside.
Yeah,
And that kind of goes into the occult detective thing, right? So what as an occult detective, you sit there and you collect all these things, right? And you're pulling a little bit from this faith, this tradition, and so that you have all these tools to
hmm,
use. um and and so that's kind of the way I look at it. Is so I read anything that crosses my path,
right.
and I find what I can use, and I take it,
Yeah,
you know and I make it work for me. So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I know I was really big into like the Stewarts
Yeah,
books. um and that's just, and obviously that's very old school now. It
yeah,
doesn't really fly, but I have a soft spot in my heart for it,
yeah.
'cause that was there at the beginning. So
Well, you have a soft spot for anything, positive in your formative years. Just because it's we have it's what shapes us, and we look back on them fondly. you know
right,
um
like you take somebody like Dion Fortune, who had just adored her, right? But man, there's some really difficult things that you run across but you got to keep in context the time period
yeah,
that she was writing it. And people change, and you can't
yeah,
throw it out just because she had some odd views on this or that,
yeah, yeah,
because it was a different era.
yeah.
So, and
No,
this
absolutely. And
current climate's very quick to just dismiss everything.
yeah.
If and you got to have a little tougher skin, I think, sometimes, and just work past it. So
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, you can you know look at any historical figure with modern eyes, and you'll find them lacking. I mean, all these people that, oh well, John Fortune was racist, Aleister Crowley was racist and sexist, and da 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 da. They need to not exist. Like we we need to stop talking about them and buying their books, blah 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 blah. Okay, well, Carl Jung was, and everyone, oh, his big red book, and we love him, and archetypes, da 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 da. He was an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
So throw out your big red book.
Yeah.
you know
Hey, look, simple fact is in 50 years, those people are going to look back on us and they're going to judge us
yeah
because we're going to fall short of
Yeah.
whatever it is that they're, where they're at. So
yeah, absolutely. I just had someone on Twitter, I can't remember which author it was, that we were talking about, and how they were harmful, and harmful to neurodivergent people and transphobic. And like, I don't recall them ever saying anything transphobic in any of their books. And this person's like, well, no, they didn't say anything transphobic in their books. They didn't mention trans people in their books, and that makes transphobic and harmful to trans people and to neurodivergent people. And I'm like, that can't be the bar,
right.
that you judge a 20-year-old book on that, because they didn't mention trans people, because 20 years ago we weren't talking about trans people the way we are today. Like 20 years ago, or this, like, well, it would be a little more than 20 years ago, because this was the 90s,
Right.
that this, I can't remember which author was mentioned, but in the 90s, how the conversation about trans people today, well, in the 90s, that was about gay and lesbian and
Right.
and bisexual people. So we're
Yeah. Go back even further and you'll run into, what was it, homosexuals were the opposite gender in a previous life, and that's being carried over, right? It's just a total lack of understanding,
yeah
and they were just trying to work their way through it,
yeah
and that's what it took to get us to where we are now.
exactly
It's part of the journey.
exactly
Yeah,
yeah so it's just, I mean, we're going through a cultural shift, and that's fine. I mean, we don't have to look that far back to the 60s for another major cultural shift. We survived, we're going to be fine. The only differences and the problem is social media, because everything is so much, everything happens a lot quicker, and it's just so easy to take things out of context, and so like, I spend a lot of time on social media because there's some good characters on there, but I don't do a lot of interacting. I don't get into a lot of discussions because it seems a little pointless.
right. And there's a very vocal minority of people out there that ruin it for everybody
yeah
else.
yeah yeah
You see it with Georgina, right? With her little Thelema videos, she does
yeah
the TikTok stuff, all the TikTok, which and people are just horrible. You'll just run across these, sexist, misogynist,
yeah
blathering that just gets dumped on these poor girls, and it's, yeah. So sometimes, yeah, you feel like you kind of want to walk away from it.
yeah so
I,
I'm just like scrolling through and liking my friends' stuff, and posting like, haha, how funny, just because it's like, if you attempt to get into a serious conversation with one of your friends, someone's going to jump in and attack
right,
you for being something.
right. How
So
dare you? How dare you like that? Or
yeah
how dare you retweet that? Well, sometimes you retweet things because you want people to see it, not necessarily because you agree with it.
yeah
But it's just like, hey, you should see this. Hey, have you seen this thing that people are saying?
yeah
And they think that that equates somehow to your support in a
yeah
thing. It's just it's
yeah
the Wild West out there, man.
yeah
You got to lighten up.
See, I like keeping an eye on transphobes and homophobes and Nazis. You know what I mean? As opposed
Right.
to, well, I'm going to block them so I never see what's going on. But I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, I want to keep an eye on them. I want to know what's going on.
Look, right.
I want to know what steps they're taking.
I followed Donald Trump all through his presidency on Twitter because I wanted to have firsthand see the stuff that he was saying.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that was the fact that I followed him did not equate to me supporting him.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I want to keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. It's funny. It's just, you know, people are strange, and the social media is a crazy beast. And I thank the gods that I live in a place where I can just go walk out in the woods and get away from it, you know, and I like to spend as much time out there as I can.
Yeah. Well, I'm old enough, like I'm not Gen X and I'm not millennial. There's this like I can't even the word's escaping me for a moment, but a micro generation. And
Right.
they named it like Zennials, and it's people born between 78 and 84. They were born in an analog world and grew up in a digital world. So, you know, because I'm definitely not Gen X.
Right.
I don't have that level of angst, and I'm definitely not a millennial. So social media, I utilize social media. I utilize the internet, but I find it's a lot easier for me to walk away from than a lot of younger people. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't, I wasn't born into it.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah. Me too. I was born in the mid '60s. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So my senior year in high school, I'm pretty sure that was the first year they had a computer lab, and they were like little Apple computers, little cubes, and you could do basic stuff on it, right? Really, well, the basic language is what you were learning. So,
Yeah.
so that was my introduction. Then I go to college, and they had a computer lab there, right? But you would go and you would request information on the computer, send out an electronic mail, and you get a response back like 2 or 3 days later.
Right.
Right. You know, so it was very, very primitive, my introduction to it. So
Oh, that's hilarious.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah. So, and now that's kind of what I do for a living. I work in a computer tech office, doing like phone tech support.
Right.
And it's funny. I started working there like 20 years ago, and I didn't even own a computer when I went to work at the place. So they were going to train me on how to do the tech support, and the guy just kind of, the guy that was supposed to train me, he's supposed to train me for 2 days, and he just kind of, he was involved in his own thing, and he didn't show me anything. And so I had to learn it all really quick, just like doing Alta Vista searches then, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I learned everything, and people were on dial-up, and it was a real learning experience. Like I said, I've been there 20 years now, so
Yeah.
So I see all sides of it.
Yeah, how far we've come. And here's me. I just learned recently that my tablet here that I'm actually using for this interview, it shuts off like a laptop if I have it attached to its keyboard. I just discovered that.
Right.
Yeah. I just discovered that I can connect remotely to my television with my tablet, and and so sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm turning into my parents. Like I'm
Right.
old, you know what I mean? Where I'm sure like all of this stuff is just second nature to
Right.
people younger than me. And here's me just like, oh, my tablet turned off like a laptop. How cool.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's all just changing so fast.
Yeah.
That and it's the same way, it's indicative of society as a whole is changing so fast.
Yeah.
Everything's just racing ahead, and you're seeing that in magic. It is evolving. You just watch it evolve. Like within a matter of months, you can see changes in thought. And
Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
how do you keep up with it? How do you stay fresh?
Yeah.
At a point, you kind of give up a little bit, and like, look, this is what I know. I will take in stuff as it comes along, but this is what I know. This is what works for me.
Yeah.
And everybody finds that comfort level, and but you can't shut out the information of the other stuff, but you got to be true to yourself,
Yeah.
So.
And that's where I think like a personal practice, like if you don't have like a really good personal practice, and I don't mean where like you've attained some sort of like adept status. I don't mean like that, or
Right.
you have a practice where you're like, okay, well, I'm done learning. I don't need to learn any more new things. But I just mean like it's like some level of personal practice that you can really ground yourself in and remind yourself why you're on, magic Twitter in the first place,
Right.
because, or spiritual Twitter, witch Twitter, whatever, to remind yourself why you're there in the first place, because you do this magic, you have this spiritual practice, and how important it is to you. Because if it wasn't important to you, you wouldn't be part of occult Twitter,
Right. Right.
you wouldn't be doing those hashtags and having those conversations. So that personal practice is, really essential, whether that's, like I do my daily practice, my daily thing. Sometimes I slip up, or over Christmas, I'll go days without doing a daily practice because I'm just drinking for however many days straight. So
Right.
it's been like, well, what's the point of doing, LBRPs? But yeah, I try to be very good, very dedicated with like a daily thing. Doing
Right.
this, like all of my magic products, that helps because I'm in like I'm sitting in my ritual room right now, and I'm here every day, all day, um making magic, because I'm making my products. So that
Right.
certainly helps. Although that's not personal, but that certainly helps.
Yeah, but your products are amazing. I mean,
Thank
I just
you.
love what you do. I mean, my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, I mean, they're, when I first opened up that care package that you sent, right, and just the, that explosion of smells that came out of that box. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like, wow, it's transcendent. It's just, yeah, you do great work, and
Thank
they're
you.
so, my
Well,
goodness.
most people did, obviously don't know this because I have like 500 followers and the podcast is new, but Bob here designed the graphic for the LVX Files, and so he got a care package of products, because
Actually, you designed it. I just, made it. You
well,
told me what you wanted, and man, it was a great idea, and I loved it. So
yeah, but you just made it so much better. And I mean, I don't have, like I have like this basic paint program, not Microsoft Paint, but like this, program. And
right, right.
it's good for, a normal person like me. When I have to build an ad or whatnot, it's good, but I couldn't do something to that level of professional design that you did. I'm sure if I got software and I played around with it, I would think,
Mm.
but whatever, that's neither here nor there. Anyways, that's you created it. It's so beautiful. And I look at it because it's so professional looking.
Well,
I
thank you. Yeah.
I still look at it and I'm like, I can't believe I own this. Like this is my graphic for my podcast. Like this looks perfect, like because it just looks so professional, and I know I couldn't achieve something like that. So I still look at it every once in a while. I made it my wallpaper on my desktop, and
Right.
I'm like, this is mine.
Mm.
Like, wow,
I,
this is incredible.
Thrilled you love it. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
and I
absolutely.
love to do stuff like that. It's I just love art in general. I think art and magic are intertwined.
Absolutely.
And I mean, back a few years ago, I was designing T-shirts for like MMA fighters,
Okay.
which is weird. And so like I'm doing this stuff, and I'm integrating like little magical things into it,
Cool.
right? So like I always try to put something like that, in the work. So yeah, I do like book covers and logos, and just about anything that people want. And I work really cheap, so.
Yeah.
So if anybody out there, anybody in your audience is looking for something, I'm easy to find. So
Yeah. Hit Bob up. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, my friend Fred RC, he was interviewing someone on his podcast. His podcast is called Magic Without Fears, which is my favorite
yeah,
podcast. Definitely listen to it. And he was talking to this guy. So he started talking about my podcast, The Lux Files, to this guy, Jim. And Jim ended up like Googling it or whatever, and finding the logo. And he's like, oh my God, that logo is amazing. The graphic that he designed. And he's like, oh, it's so amazing. And then Frat RC started explaining, the sigillum and the triangle of manifestation and the LVX and what that all means and da 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 da. And it was just so cool to hear people talking about my podcast and the graphic. And, it's like, I'm eternally grateful, because I just could not have achieved that look.
well,
So
and it makes it real, right? So
yeah,
when you have an image that stands out there representing you to the world, and it that it manifests everything
yeah,
that you're trying to project. And
yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
glad you like it, and I thought it was a great idea that you had for it.
Thank you. Well,
And that's a rarity. Usually like a client comes at you and they say, well, okay, so this is kind of what I want. So you'll design it, you'll send it off to them. No, that's not it. Okay, and you do this, and you might have to do 10 or 12 designs before that's it. And
yeah.
it's you were able to clearly define what you wanted in such a beautiful way that it did it created itself. So
Well, I think I'm creative enough to really be able to get the point across, because I can see it in my head. I'm really good at visualizing. And number two, I'm so uptight that like this is how I want it. This is how it's going to be. So,
right.
and if you have that kind of attitude, then you need to have a clear direction, because those people that it has to be just like this, but they can't express what just like this is. And
Yeah,
they're the ones that get pissed off because it's not just like this, even though they don't know what this is, therefore you don't know what this is. So
right.
yeah, so I'm able to see it in my head and then communicate it clearly enough, because I
That
want it a certain way,
that's magic in a nutshell. That creative visualization, right?
Yeah.
That is magic. And then that's the thing they try to ingrain in you in your earliest days in that journey,
Mhm.
right? Being able to build that. I know that I used to do a lot of astral work. I still try to, but not as much as I did when I was younger. But when you build the astral temple and you're exploring the astral realms, and yeah, so I went through the Monroe stuff, the Robert Bruce stuff. But I actually think I think it was Denning and Phillips, actually, the one of the first books I read on astral projection. But that whole creative visualization exercise that you do leading up to astral work that's a building block, and
Yeah.
that's something that who's been through that that's just a big part. And I think a lot of people leapfrog over that.
Yeah.
I think it hurts them
Yeah.
in the long run.
When I talk to people, like less experienced people with magic, I try to find like mundane world sort of analog, you know. And so this actually, like you said, is a really good example, because I saw the graphic in my head well enough that I can clearly explain what I want, and I got my intended result the first time. And that's
Right.
what magic is. And if you don't have it clear enough in your head, if you can't visualize it, you you don't get the results you're intending. So, you know,
Right.
you can consider that like, well, this didn't work, you know. Well, what part of it didn't work? Well, obviously was not being able to visualize clearly the graphic.
That kind of comes back to Crowley, right? Because I remember reading it the first time I read about how he would he would play like three different people in chess, and he would be blindfolded, and they would call out their moves, and he would visualize three separate boards
Mhm.
and be able to track every move on those boards and win,
Yeah,
beat all three of them,
yeah,
because he could visualize. I mean, that the level of skill that, to be able to do that,
yeah.
that just always intrigued me. And I tried and I tried to get there. Never reached those levels.
No,
I couldn't even, not even a single chess set,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's still an amazing, just, yeah.
I have no problems in saying, you know, oh, I'm so creative and I'm really good at visualizing, because I am. Yeah, I am. I've been doing it like, you know, like the creative side ever since I was a kid. So that ability to visualize, you know, comes quite naturally. It wasn't something I had to learn at 14 when I started practicing magic. It was already sort of built in. But
So,
with that being said, could I do what Crowley did? No, no, no.
so because you got started in that so early, did you find you were able to like lucid dream at an early age? Like, were you able to control your dreams,
Yeah,
manipulate?
yeah, not prior to coming to the world of magic. Like, I don't ever recall. Well, so not lucid dreaming where I could control my dreams. Lots of flying in my dreams, lots of flying. But it wasn't until like I picked up my first book on witchcraft at the age of 14. And in my teenage years, I spent a lot of work um, uh, developing like astral projection and lucid dreaming and stuff like that. And I don't do it as much as what I did as a teenager. Um, but like I still like regularly visit my astral temple and you know, keep that vibrant and energetic and stuff like that. Um, yeah. I mean,
You know,
it took it took work. Like, it didn't happen overnight, but it wasn't. I see. You know, I come across a lot of people where they just struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle, and it wasn't a struggle. It was just practicing the techniques until they worked. So it was effortless in that regards. You know,
right.
it just took like, oh, this lucid dreaming is a thing, astral travel is a thing, this is how you do it, you know. So it's like, okay, well, I'll do these steps until it happens, and then it just happened.
You know, I've never had a flying dream.
Really?
Never. I, instead of fly, I leap like the Incredible Hulk.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So I will leap great distances and then land and then leap again, but never fly.
I
And
I
now
had
I can fly astrally, like when I
Yeah.
read, right? But not and never in a dream. I don't know what. I mean, it means something, obviously, but
I fly more in my dreams than I don't, which is interesting.
to be honest, I in my dreams I spend most of my time as somebody else.
Yeah.
I rarely am me in a dream. I'm usually someone else. And
That's
that's,
interesting.
yeah.
I'm always me in a dream. I've never not been that I can recall. Now,
But,
me in interesting situations like living on a starship with aliens, not like abducted. I'm now living with aliens, but like a Star Trek version of
oh,
reality type thing where I'm yeah. So I'm always me. It's just the situations are rather questionable. Recently, I was a spy that had to secretly get into Russia to get 100 Dutch people out of Russia secretly on a secret plane. So that was fun.
yeah, that's exciting. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's.
that was a lot of fun being a spy in Russia. So I quite
So
enjoyed that.
do you have frequent like reoccurring dreams where you'll be in the same location, but the events will evolve?
Not as much as I used to as a kid and as a teenager. Reoccurring dreams were pretty dominant, pretty regular. Now, not as much. Um, yeah, not as much. Um, what I get more now is in my dream. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this right. Where in my dream, I dreamed something that happened that I thought was real until I woke up and realized I was dreaming, but I'm still in the dream, kind of like that crazy
Right.
circle, Um, yeah, stuff like that, where I'll be dreaming about something that, oh, that was a dream I had, and then wake up and realize I was dreaming about thinking about a dream that I had, but that I never actually ever had, you
Well,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of, that circle of insanity, that's my head, you know? So,
Right.
yeah.
I have this one dream. I've probably been revisiting this place for almost 50 years. I started having it when I was a kid, and where I'm kind of like disembodied, right? And I'm following this child who's like playing in a barn, and then he leaves the barn, he goes up to the house, and his father is there, and he's sick, and there's a nurse that's tending to him, and then there's a scene where the nurse kills the father, and then years later, that kid, he's older, and he's kind of out for dinner with the nurse and having a conversation. And it's just this unfolding story that's been playing out, like, for most of my life. I mean,
That's
I
fascinating.
probably was in the first grade when I had the first dream, but it's always that same place. And I'm always watching it from above,
Right.
right? I'm watching it play out. I'm no one in the dream. I'm just watching it, and I get little tidbits. And it used to be frequently, but like you said, now that I'm older, it's 2-3 years might pass between another little sniglet of it. But
Now,
yeah, stuff like that.
over the course of the years, did that dream evolve? Like, did the storyline get
Yeah, it kept getting
bigger?
bigger.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I kept getting new, and sometimes it would start in a different place,
Okay.
right? But I recognized all the people, and it's just like, so you're just following this little story along, and it's yeah, it's
That's
and
interesting.
sometimes right, like, like all of a sudden, oh, now you're back at the beginning. Only it starts a little bit before it did before, right? Now
Right.
you're following this like old truck because it's going over a railroad track, and it's going towards the barn. And then you go into the barn. Oh, there's the kid,
Yeah, yeah.
climbing around and stuff. And so yeah, it starts at different places, and yeah, and I've always thought, I mean, sometime I'm gonna have to write it all out.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but of course, it being a dream, not all of it makes sense,
Yeah.
So, but still, it's fascinating, and there are other things that interject in it too, other reoccurring dreams. But that's the big one, That's the
Yeah.
one I always, every night when I go to bed, I think, am I going to revisit that tonight? And I think it's been a few years since I've had one, and
Have
I'm always afraid I'll never go back there.
Yeah. Have you ever done any sort of training with lucid dreaming to, if for nothing else, to say be able to get to this dream whenever you want?
Right. Yep. I've done a little bit, but it's again, you're on your own, right? Because there's not a lot of people to work with around here.
Mm.
So, and I've had varying degrees of success, but that dream eludes me, right? So that story, for whatever reason, I've been able to access other things. I've been able to access other people's dreams. We used to like slip into each other's dreams and leave each other little clues, and we come back, the next day and say, hey, so here, I've written something down, okay. Well, was there, a coin with two heads? Yep, yep, that's exactly what I left there for you. That kind of stuff. So yeah, and again, that was in the early '90s when we were doing a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. But
and
that
yeah,
you, how interesting.
yeah.
Hmm. I wonder if that's a like a past life, if like, because you, then I don't know if you'd be able to access it through lucid dreaming methods, if it.
Right. I thought that at one time. We used to do a lot of past life regression work, but I was never able to get into that dream. But I've thought that, mainly because, like you said, there's a very like late 40s, early 50s feel to the whole
Right.
thing. So yeah, that made me think like, oh, well, maybe I'm just, and then who am I? Am I the nurse? Am I the little boy? Am I somebody else altogether? Am I the father?
Yeah.
And I'm viewing it because I'm dead and I'm a ghost and I'm viewing, right? So there's so many options. Yeah, it's a mystery I'd like to crack sometime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially
Kind of
since,
why I brought it up. It's like,
yeah,
can we talk?
especially since you've been having it for so long, that would drive me a little crazy not being able to have
Right. You
answers.
want the end of the story because there's got to be, right. It's got to go further.
Yeah.
It can't, you can't leave me hanging.
Yeah.
I'm not going to die with this cliffhanger hanging over my head.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Do you have do you do like a daily routine, um some sort of magical or spiritual process that's kind of like, this something that you do daily or semi-daily that's like, I need this for my own sanity?
Well, right. Okay. So I start every morning, where I do kind of a little ritual prayer. When I put my Mjolnir on, I don't know if you can see it in the
Yep.
screen. I picked this up in the mid '80s. I had a guy, a silversmith, make it for me,
Nice.
which is it's a reproduction of an archaeological find. Um, and so anyway, so every morning when I put it on, I do a prayer to the gods and the spirits, and so that's the thing that I do every day. And then nearly every day I do a tarot reading when I get to work. I always carry a deck with me, usually grab
Okay.
a different one, but and so I do a reading almost every day just to get the day going and kind of see how everything's going to unfold. know what things to try to avoid, that kind of stuff. But that's the big thing. And tarot's been with me for, since junior high school.
Yeah.
So it's always been an important part of my life. So even as I evolved more in the Norse studies, and I tried to work with the runes, and I do work with the runes, but they don't seem as natural to me,
Right.
just because I started with tarot so young, and it makes me think about all those things. You stirred up a lot here. It's like you're just thinking about all those early days, and the books and things that just meant so much to you. Are you familiar with Erica Jong's witchcraft book? What was that? That was a big deal when it came out, and that would have been 78, maybe 79, somewhere around in there. And it just had all this beautiful artwork and not a lot of ritual work per se. It was more of a just like an evolution of witchcraft. And for some reason that book just popped into my head.
Right.
Just how that was influential. And I don't know how many. There are certain hotbed books that come out like psychic magic right now, right? That's the book that everybody's, kind of hanging on. Matt did a great job with that book.
It's an excellent book. It's a great book that I think anyone or everyone, even if they're doing like a witchcraft course or whatever sort of magic course, that's a book that I think everyone could definitely incorporate into their training, into their practice, and it's really good. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that's the book that's going to define the COVID era, really.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody was like in lockdown, and everybody in our circles, that was the book that everybody read, and so yeah, kudos to him. He did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And a good guy. I enjoy chatting with him every once in a while on Twitter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very nice, very sincere, very genuine. And he writes like not like a writer, but like a teacher who's emotionally invested in your success.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's a great way to define that. Yeah. I agree totally. And you think about those people that come along that are that are good teachers, that are right. I don't know how much you get to I don't know how much you interact with people in the community and in the real world, because that just doesn't happen anymore, really. So
yeah.
But I think back like the first time I met Oberon Zell and Morning Glory, right? They were just such so definitive of that late 60s 70s magic culture, right?
Yeah.
The first time I met them, it was just a big treat for me because I'm old enough that I remember when they were touring around with the unicorn and all that.
Yeah.
And they're very much of a different era, and Oberon, he's still out there living the dream, so.
I recently read The Wizard and the Witch, which was about the two of them. And it was such a great read. I think it's well worth people, newer generations, my generation, millennials, Gen Z, finding out about these people, their stories, and how witchcraft and paganism evolved from, the mid 20th century. Because I didn't realize this. I thought that Wicca came to North America and kicked off the neo-pagan movement in North America. I didn't realize it was happening in both in England and North America at the same time, but just in two very different ways. Like, I mean, Wicca was very and when I say Wicca, I'm talking about like Gardnerian Wicca, like
Right.
very ceremonial and whatnot. And then you have Oberon and Morning Glory, and they're hippies, and they're living out in the bush, and
Yeah.
they're living their hippie polyamorous life. And
Same thing was happening with Asatru, right? So here in America, with Steve McNallen and the Edred Thorson and all those guys, as they were developing that Norse faith here in America, at the same time, over in Norway, it was that faith was being rekindled, and so it's that there's a current, right? And so
yeah.
same thing was happening with it was global, and it's just so witchcraft evolved in the same way, and Asatru did, and the way that all that stuff merged. And I got to tell you, in my faith, it's harder than most, right? Because you got a lot of really, well, you got a lot of bad eggs, a lot of bad actors in your faith, and it's hard to weed your way through it all. So luckily with Wicca, it's not as much of a minefield, but
Right. Did I just lose you there?
yeah, you cut out for just a second.
Oh, okay. No,
you're
no,
back now.
no, you were talking like Wicca, not as much as a minefield, and I just said right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But it sounded like our sound dropped out. So
Could have, yeah, could have.
okay. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's all really dicey. It's
Yeah, and that's, going back to like when I was talking about like I like to keep an eye on people, especially with like heathenry and the runes, and that unfortunate Nazi history, and how these white supremacist and neo-Nazi organizations today are co-opting them, the imagery
right.
and the lore and the mythology. And it's like, okay, I get that you don't want to engage with these people, and you don't want to see it. I get that, and you don't need to engage with them, but keep an eye on them. Like
Right.
don't block them out to the point where it's as if they don't exist to you, because we tried that. Like, we were so proud of ourselves, like we all patted ourselves on the back. Oh, we got rid of white supremacy, da 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 da. Well, no, they just
They went underground.
yeah. And then guess what happened in 2008? Obama's elected president. Heaven forbid we should have a black president. And they started coming out. And then Trump arrives and they're like, oh, we have free agency again. Like, they didn't go away, or they didn't disappear. They just went away. They just went into the background, and because we ignored them and shamed them out of the public eye. And I mean,
Right.
ignore it all you want, but ignoring it doesn't solve the problem.
Right. Exactly. You got to shine a light on it.
Yeah, I mean, I could ignore that tumor in my stomach. That's not going to do me any good at the end of the day, So yeah, and
Yeah.
especially since we have, and all of these people online, they're like, they're so anti-fascist and so anti-white supremacist and so anti-Nazi in witchcraft and occultism. That's great, but
Right.
but your anti stance is just block, like
Right.
you're not
And I think they take it too far, right? With a
you're
lot
not
of like
but you're not doing anything to you're not
the
really doing anything to help the situation, to change the
and
situation.
and screaming about everything being cultural appropriation. Like, how dare you use tarot cards? Don't you realize that you're Whoa, slow down. First learn the history,
Yeah.
and but they do that with so many things, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
yeah, it's and that's rough, because you can just take things too far.
Yeah. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, the problem is that you and I and every other white person weren't we weren't raised to take a back seat to anything,
Right.
because that's not the world we grew up in. We grew up in the world for white people essentially, and even though we're not like outwardly racist, we still are influenced by that upbringing, by the fact that society is the way it is. The
Right.
problem with the cultural appropriation thing is we're not having a conversation with indigenous people about it, or black people, or people,
Right.
voodoo practitioners. It's white people saying, okay, I've made the decision that this is cultural appropriation, and I've made the decision that you can touch
Right.
this but you can't
Right.
touch that. And it's like, if you're really if you're really interested in advancing other people and other cultures and black voices, you need to start talking less and listening more. You need to take a back seat
Right.
to this
Yeah.
conversation, be a supporting role to this conversation. But again, we weren't raised to take a back seat to anything. And it's infuriating, but it's also amusing at the same time, because tarot is a closed practice. Only Romani can practice tarot. Well, we know tarot was invented by the Italians, number one.
Right.
But number two, the tarot reading gypsy is a culturally offensive stereotype created in the 19th century in French literature. So you you as a white person deciding what is cultural appropriation and what isn't, and let's be honest, you're saying like, I'm one of the good white people, that's why I'm doing this.
Right. Right.
um you're using a culturally offensive stereotype to show how non-racist you are.
Right. Hey,
You
look,
know?
I'll be the first person, because where I live, I didn't go to school with people of color.
Yeah.
I think there was like a Filipino brother and sister. And now, of course, we had Latinos around here, as Hispanic migrant workers, right?
Right.
So some of them incorporated in, but as far as African Americans, I was probably, I mean, other than seeing them on TV, I mean, it's in person. I never saw anybody. There's like, I think two African Americans that live in this town now,
Yeah.
right? So both are elderly ladies, right? So it's just not, when I went to college, it was not integrated. I was around white people.
Right.
Just it's a very white state that I live in.
Yeah.
If you're not living in one of the urban areas, you're just you're surrounded by white people all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So that was like when I got the opportunity to get out into the world, that was one of the first things I did, was try to seek out other ethnicities, other like I went to a Jewish temple, right, just to see okay, I want to experience this.
Yeah.
So a lot, college helped out a lot in that regard. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's really hard when you live in a bubble,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
I live in a I live in a very tight bubble here where I'm at,
And I think
and
that bubble, thing plays a lot into it, because you have people, and they can be living in very culturally diverse cities or whatnot. But when it comes to the magical community, occult community, whatever, they can be very isolated, and
Yeah.
they're not um, experiencing voodoo practitioners and um, Romani people, and so they're just seeing stuff on TikTok and rolling with it and then taking it to the extreme. And one thing that I've noticed within the past couple weeks ish is, now one of my sort of passions is um studying Nazi occultism.
Oh yeah, yeah. Me too. Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed over the couple weeks, a really big shift, and they're not doing it this intentionally. I'm not saying they're neo-Nazis, because they're not, but feel free to educate yourself on where your words are coming from and what they really mean. But over the past couple weeks, I've seen a really big shift to real like Nazi language, like on race and uh it's mind-boggling, because that's not what they're intending, but that's
Right. But they don't know.
that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Don't
but
know.
that's the result, the race implications, you're not only like you're white, so you only have this, but runes or Norse, you have to be uh Norse, you have to be Anglo-Saxon,
Right.
and
Right. You got to have that bloodline.
yeah,
You got to be able to trace your genetic code.
yeah,
Yeah. You run into a lot of those people, and and I went through that at a stage, right, where I was thinking, well, why would you want to be involved in this if you weren't not connected by blood to it? And
yeah,
then
you
you
know,
realize, oh, well, it's you you can't put up walls. I mean, how can you judge, right? That
yeah,
was like, okay, so if you remember when the AFA had the whole dust up with their transphobic comments, right?
yep,
And my first thought, my gut thought was, have you not read any of the mythology that you're purporting to worship? Have you heard of this guy named Loki, who is as transgender as you get, right?
yeah,
He gave birth to a horse, for
yeah,
God's sake. And so how can you deny, you know, transgender folk when your gods themselves are depicted in stories as, you know, as binary, as cross dressers, as, all that stuff's in the stories.
yeah,
I just don't see how they can, you know,
yeah,
put up those kind of barriers. So
yeah. But I mean, that's human nature. It's they can, you know, they can
there,
easily,
I'm uncomfortable, so I want to, keep it at bay. I
yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah. But that's I don't know. No, I think we're just we're in a big cultural shift. And like I said, this isn't the first cultural shift. Um,
Won't be the last.
we had one in, like, a big one in the 60s. We survived, we'll always survive. It's infuriating sometimes. Like you said, when you're seeing all these like 20 somethings and teenagers on TikTok being like, oh well, you're Celtic, you can only do this, you're Anglo-Saxon, you can only do this, you're Black, you
Right.
can only do this. And the implications of segregation. So you just hope that they wake up one day and realize, that they need to educate themselves on reality and whatnot.
Not to mention the fact, for most of these, people are Americans, right? And if you would actually look at your genetic makeup, I mean, you're a hodgepodge
Yeah.
of, you're a melting pot of a wide variety of peoples. Like, in my genetic makeup, yes, I'm primarily, Scots, English, right? But there's like 13% is Scandinavian. I've got like 3%, which uh, is Jewish. I'm even like 1.5% African.
Right.
So there's all these different, ethnicities floating around in my genetic makeup. How can you deny any part of that?
Yeah.
It's who you are. It's that long line of how you got where you're at,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you need to celebrate it.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, there's also like they're not understanding, the difference between cultural practices and closed practices. I mean, like
right,
voodoo is a closed practice. It's initiatory, but it's a living tradition.
right,
Um, uh, Norse paganism isn't a living tradition. It's not closed to anybody.
right,
You know what I
right.
mean? Um, and I just they're I just you
It's
know
it's it's exasperating. Yes,
yeah,
it's
just throw up my hands and be like, I'm just yeah, and you know what, the thing I always go back to is like, okay, you talk about the work, I'm too busy doing the work, so I'm gonna keep doing the work, you keep talking about it, and you know
right. Yeah,
just-
when you're out there practicing it, you'll realize.
yeah,
It's and you know what? Take a trip somewhere. Get out of your little cubicle wherever you're stuck, and go out and see a bit of the real world, which I don't think we get enough of. You know, when you go to New Orleans and walk the streets and go in and out of uh, those occult shops down there. I mean, you learn a lot. Take a trip to Salem.
yeah,
Wherever there's places that you can go and kind of immerse yourself in a culture, and you don't have to be there long,
yeah.
but see people living and breathing this stuff, and you have a better understanding.
Yeah, like so that I think that's where the problem is, with a lot of these, because they don't have that community like we had. I
Right,
think
where you had to actually go someplace to
yeah,
learn something.
yeah, and you
Right,
had mentors and elders around you, whereas a lot of people don't now. I think because it's so easy to access people online, but that's not the same because you just you don't get the same exposure
right.
and gaining of knowledge and whatnot. So it makes for a difficult situation.
And they
Uh,
tend to gravitate towards pretty people,
yeah,
right, online, right. So yeah, you get a lot of dicey stuff out there, just
yeah,
for that reason.
yeah,
When we had to go out and hang out with people that were newly fresh out of the woods with twigs in their hair, and say,
yeah,
"Yeah, teach me what you know, man,"
yeah, pretty
because
much.
you're out there living it.
Yeah, yeah. We could talk about my first high priestess and her insistence that bathing X amount of days before ritual was a bad idea.
Yeah,
Um, it's like God, God bless you.
yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Right. Yeah, that's sorry.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of ritual bathing
yeah,
every day.
yeah,
They-
yeah, yeah. No kidding. Yeah, no
yeah,
kidding. Yeah, it's funny how like she was. I think she went like 3 or 4 days before ritual, not bathing. Meanwhile, I'm like, ritual purification, ritual bath, like with all the pomp and ceremony attached to it. You know what I mean?
right.
But yet, when we come together, um, uh, things just work. We come from something from two different angles, but yet we make things work, and it's harmonious. But that's because we come together,
Right.
and I think you have to come together. And as great as social media is, that's not the same as coming together and it's not having community. I've met a lot of great people online through social media, but it's not the same as having that community, where you're together in
Right.
ritual, and bringing all of your different ideas and beliefs together, and putting something beautiful together.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've lacked the most is living where I do. There just is not that community of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it'd be very solitary for me. So I mean, you'd meet one or two people, and you might get together and do stuff. But you're from so diverse. You don't have that a commonality, but you find those places
Yeah.
to interact. And like I said, we used to do a lot of dream research, astral projection, past life regression, that kind of stuff, because those were common grounds that
Mm.
we could touch base on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. But yeah, you got to do what you got to do, especially with, we're such a small community, that, not like you have to settle, but, uh, it's not like you have to take what you can get. I don't mean it in those terms, but,
Right.
you have some commonalities with someone, you explore them.
Right.
The differences don't make you enemies, and like, they're just differences. It's not a big
Right.
deal,
Right.
especially when you have
As long as they're not actively seeking to harm other people,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
then then yes, you can learn from them, and they can learn from you,
yeah,
and you'll both be better for it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, so let's talk about where we can find Bob Freeman online.
Well, the easiest place is to go to occultdetective.com.
Mhm.
I've been blogging pretty regularly there of late. So you'll get some interesting stories and such. You can find me as a cult detective on Twitter.
Mhm.
That's probably where I'm the most active. And you can find me by the same moniker at Facebook.
Right.
Yep, so
And Instagram.
yes, and
Yeah.
Instagram
Instagram.
also a cult detective there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
I have a brand. Yep. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I highly recommend everyone reading your blog, especially when you do your 30 days of Halloween and all of
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. Those are always a lot of fun. Yeah.
They're so fun, they're so great, and those stories of that they're just small little tidbits of your life that you just pull out and put up in in like the 30 days of Halloween blog posts and whatnot. They're just fascinating. They're so great. Some of your stories are like, I not in a well, I don't believe that happened kind of way, but in a like, holy crap kind of way. That's
Right.
incredible,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and they're fun to write, and they're fun to share. I guess is the best way. Like I always love letting people know about like the time we went to Roslyn Chapel, right,
Mm,
in Scotland. Uh, and this was before the Da Vinci Code came out, so the place was practically abandoned.
yeah.
And so we roll in there, and we had the place all to ourselves. Right, the tour guy, the tour guy came in and said, "Well, this place was built," and I'm like, "Yeah, I've read books. Yeah, I know about it." And okay, well, enjoy yourself. And we were left alone in that chapel. We
That's
were
all.
able to go down into the lower crypts, just had the run of the place. So I'm like doing a little mini investigation while we're there, and and if you go today, you're going to be there with 100 people.
Yeah.
So I've been lucky. If you get to go overseas anytime, like Scotland's, Edinburgh in particular, right? So yeah, you got the Weird Shop, you got the Witchery, you got the witchcraft tour, the
Hmm.
ghost tours. It's a great place for paranormal adventuring. And so yeah, so I talk about that stuff on the blog, and all the excuse me, all the fascinating places right here and around where I live. I mentioned Hobbitland earlier,
Oh,
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hobbitland, right, is this area near what back in the Battle of 1812, right? So there was this massacre that occurred there. So it's kind of a hotbed of paranormal activity anyway,
Hmm.
because of this ancient battlefield. But the Miami Indians, they talked about these people called the Payasa, right, which are little people. Basically, you're looking at like land whites, the Fae,
Hmm.
right? And they would go out and commune with these things and leave offerings to them. So, sometime in the 60s, people hearing those stories started calling that area Hobbitland, right? Because little people, right?
Hey.
So that was like teenagers just flocked to that place as kids. But so you'll have all these mysterious things that'll happen, like stacked stones out in the middle of the river,
Okay.
right? Where they're standing up on edge, and it's like, there's just no way people are doing it, and
Right.
these things
Right.
pop up, and and so you can go out there and commune with these things, and it's just amazing, and it's just like it sounds very made up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you're out there, and in the night you got a campfire going, and you realize, oh yeah, you're surrounded by that. They're still here,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and they're wondering, well, where's the Indians that used to come here and leave offerings to us? So so you take up that mantle, you begin leaving offerings to them, and it's a great place, right? And that's just like about a 20-minute drive from here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's like I said, Somerset, which is close by, and that whole Mississippi River is just amazing. That leads up to a place called Seven Pillars. Seven
Right.
Pillars, yep, was a place where the native tribes would gather and have basically court, and they would bring people in, and you'd be judged, and they'd lop their heads off, and their heads would fall into the water below. But the columns that are carved in this limestone are just beautiful,
Mhm.
and they've got all these little egresses, and the Miami believed that those were passageways into the afterlife. So it's just a hotbed of activity there, and just right near that place is where Chief Godfrey used to live, right? And so he's got this little farmhouse, and there's a barn there, and and there was this shaman named Whitefeather, who ended up like placing curses on one of the rival clans, and there's the graveyard nearby there is just littered with all these people that were killed in this witch war by these
Wow.
natives. And so he was killed, and they have him buried in the corner of the barn, so that the cornerstone is right on top of his body, so that he's pinned, so that he can't re-enter as a spirit into the
Right.
world, and right. So, and I remember when they were going to tear that barn down, and people were freaking out because they were afraid that the Whitefeather was going to return if they
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
this. So there was like this big petition. All the natives came, and no, 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 no. So they ended up coughing up money to just repair the barn and keep it intact. So and that's just right there, all in that little corner of where Seven Pillars is. So it's
Right.
some fascinating stuff, and it's right above where Seven Pillars is where Cole Porter lived, right? So you got that too, this big mansion, with swimming pool and tennis courts, and there's like this big fence surrounding that property. And one time I caught pictures of these full-bodied apparitions of guys in military uniforms, like that kind of 1812 era,
Right.
walking those grounds. It's like, oh man, it's just a, like I said, and it's near the Seven Pillars where
Yeah.
supposedly this gateway to the afterlife is, so it'd be a great spot for, like the Portals from Hell crew to come out there and do an investigation there. They would love that spot. Michelle would just eat that up. She would just be inundated with the spiritual connections.
Yeah.
So,
You bring this landscape to life. It's so incredible. Like whether it's in your books or in your blog, you just bring it to life. And I feel like I know the place intimately. And I'm gonna, okay, Michelle and I definitely are gonna come and visit. And I'm just making the decision for Michelle, apparently.
that dream is going to become a reality.
Yeah,
Is what's gonna happen.
and yeah, and we'll play around. Well, that'd be kind of cool because you guys would literally be initiating me into my first like paranormal investigation.
All right, yeah.
Which would be kind of cool.
Wait till, all right, so this little town I live in, right? I mean, it's just typical Midwestern small town Indiana. You're driving through town, right? You get out by where the fairgrounds are, and right across from the fairground entrance is this Second Empire mansion, right? Just this gorgeous house. And it needs some repair, but it's just amazing, right? And in the backyard is a statue of this black robed figure standing up, and it's got its hands cupped out in front of it. And it's so solemn and so, I mean, it just radiates with this magical energy. And the guy who created that, originally it was a naked man.
Okay.
Right? And these kids came and tied a rope around its penis, and then lassoed a train, and it ripped the penis off of this thing, right? And then they wore it to school. And this was back in the late 60s, right? So it's like and that's a hilarious story. But so the artist goes out there and he's all dismayed. They mangled his death. So he puts it in shroud, and it's in, and he changed its arms so it's in mourning over the loss of its manhood. So it's kind of very like Osiris kind of right. But so, all right. So
are you suggesting that the three of us go find his penis? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, but I am suggesting that we go and see this place because you would love it. When I was a little kid and I first went there, right? So the artist, his name was Thad Miller, just was wonderful, and he did all these really cool occult paintings. But you go inside, and in the living room, he had painted his wife nude in this massive mural across the front room. And all these demons are crawling all over her and biting into her flesh, and it's just like, and I'm like, 7, 8 years old, and I'm looking at this like, oh my God, what is this? Of course it's been painted over now. He died back in the 80s, and
right.
They've changed all the cool stuff, but we do have some of his paintings on display. And this guy, the first time I saw a painting by this guy, I was helping these people move into an old a fraternal lodge. It's just like 2 blocks from where I'm living right now, and the building's collapsing. But anyway, these people were moving into it in the 80s, and they were renovating the place. They were little old folks. And I'm helping them unpack things and stuff. And I come across this painting, and it's of this young woman, and she's wearing white robes with a hood, And I mean, she looks just stunning, and obviously it's some kind of ritual attire.
Right.
And in the kind of smoke in the background, you see all these kind of demonic faces, appearing. I'm like, wow, what is this? So I asked, hey, Mrs. Maines, what is this painting? Oh, well, that's me. When I was a young girl, and I was in the Eastern Star, Job's Daughters, I think maybe it was. Yeah, is what they called them. So and yeah, and that was the robes we wore for ceremonies and stuff. And it's like, well, what about the weird faces behind it? She goes, oh, I never noticed those before. So she said, well, yeah, Thad had painted that of her. And I said, well, I didn't think Thad was no, he just painted me as if I was young, and he just did it on a lark, but and yeah, and so when I pointed out the demonic faces, she'd never noticed them before. She'd had that painting for years.
Yeah.
So it was incredible. And then it was like maybe a month later, I'm out at this party out near the Mississinawa Reservoir that this people's house. Their mother was gone, right? So, and I'm walking around this place, and people are getting high and drinking or whatever. And I turn a corner, go down the hallway, and there's a painting there, and it's of a woman with fire hair, with almost like a Medusa, but the flames are the snakes. And I was like, what is this? And I noticed Thad Miller. It's like, and so I'm making the connection on all these weird paintings. And I was like, oh, this guy was incredible.
Yeah.
And there's just another little local hero guy that is totally out of place.
Right.
And I wish I would have got to know him when he was alive. I mean, I met him in passing here and there, but I had no idea of the depth of stuff that he was involved in. And yeah, but yeah, so if you make it here, we have all these wonderful things to get involved in.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll make a point of that. Once I get my jabs and I'm allowed to cross the border again.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
We're looking at like 2024 when the world's back to normal.
Oh God, I hope not. I mean, I could understand, it taking a couple of years for like international travel to get back to normal. But, the Canadian-US border, that's going to be this year. That's going to be
it's got to fall. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to happen. I mean, our vaccines are ramping up really, really quickly. So we were so far behind, like first dose shots. So
right
behind you guys, and now we're like 8 percentage points behind you guys for first doses. So we're catching up really quickly. So things will get back to normal, and that
only about 1/3 of people in Indiana have gotten it. Right, they're just not. This is Trump country, right? So they're just like, I don't think I'll get that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're not going to get to herd immunity like that. Come on, people.
Yeah, it's interesting how these people want everything back to normal, but they don't want to do the things to get us back to normal. It's bizarre, but that's a conversation I'm getting bored of having and listening to, because it's just the same thing every day, the same arguments, and the same stubbornness. And
a lot of people, to be honest, they don't want things to go back to normal. I know a lot of people that are getting paid like a lot of money to stay at home. They're giving people like $600 a week to not work. And they were making like $300 a week.
Right.
So they're getting double pay to stay at home. They don't want that to end.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be hard to get people back into the workforce.
Yeah, but that kind of aid is going to end. They're not just going to keep COVID aid going indefinitely when COVID is gone. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to last.
Well, it's not, you're right. But the thing is like people around here, they're not getting the vaccine. So the virus isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah.
If people don't, step up.
Yeah.
So So now they're talking about incentive plans, offering people, this and that. Hey,
Yeah.
you come get the shot and we'll give you a lollipop.
Yeah.
So
It'll work.
hopefully, yeah. Hopefully people will come around. So.
Money talks. Money talks.
Yeah. I'm just happy that we're doing ghost hunts again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went through a long period where it's just me, and now it's nice to have people around again. And yeah, it's starting to feel a little normal.
Yeah.
At times, so it's nice. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, we're not there yet. I mean, we're completely locked down, like everything's shut. Like technically it's illegal for me to walk to my neighbor's house, we're completely
Wow.
locked down. It's, grocery stores are open, pharmacies are open, and that's pretty much it. But I mean, the third wave hit us here in Ontario really, really, like it kicked our ass.
Yeah. Urban centers, you're all packed in there so tight,
Yeah. So, it's not feeling like it's getting back to normal. But it will. I mean, I'm definitely, I would say by March, I finally was like, oh, I'm not okay. Like I've actually finally hit that wall where I'm like, I'm really done with this. So yeah, my age group opens up on Monday, booking my appointments, getting my first jab. My parents got their first jab 3 weeks ago, and we'll see if there's a bit of a
good. No side effects for them. Were they okay?
no side effects. Yeah, no
Good.
side effects. Nothing.
Great.
Nothing. So maybe
my mother, when she got hers, my mother got really sick after her first jab.
Yeah.
To the point so bad that they're not going to give her the second because she just had such an adverse reaction. So, so they told her, no, we're not going to take the chance.
Yeah.
So she was kind of bummed because, you kind of need that. She likes to go on cruises, and you're going to need that vaccination card.
Yeah.
To be able to do stuff like that. So she's trying to, see what she can do. Maybe try a different drug or something. So
yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm sure they can get that worked out in some way.
Hey, it's America, for goodness sake. We can come on, get on it. Get on the ball.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So is that a wrap? Do we have more? We have more to talk about?
That's probably good. I'd be more than happy to do this again someday.
Oh, we'll definitely do a round two. I don't even know what time it is. Oh, it's just after 11. Oh, we've been at it for 3 hours.
Oh, yeah. All right. I didn't know if I would have the stamina for that because with my lung thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did because it was a good conversation. But yeah, we'll definitely do a round two. I think there's some like kind of more like topic based conversations worth having as opposed to just like this is your life occult style.
All right. Yeah. And boy, I was a little scattershot tonight. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, but
no, I like how these conversations are turning very organic and flowing and moving, and I'm really enjoying how that's coming about.
Well, yeah, you start talking about a thing and then boy, it makes you think of something else, and they're fun threads to follow. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, since you mentioned it, a second episode, I'll hold you to that. We'll definitely do a second episode, and and you'll hold me to my trip to Indiana.
Absolutely.
Oh, we're gonna make that happen. We're absolutely gonna make that happen. So
yes, please.
Yeah. So we'll take care of that. So you mentioned everywhere like where people to go to find you and whatnot already, but I'm
Yep.
just going to mention that all of Bob Freeman's links are going to be in the show notes, so you'll be able to go to the show notes and directly to his blog, which is excellent, definitely worth the read. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and in the show notes is my links. There's a link, leilogonzalwin.com/links. That's the links to all of my social media for the Lux Files for Leilo Gonzalwin. That'll get you to my online store, my YouTube channel. So all the information is there for you guys in the show notes to follow us two handsome fellows. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Lux Files. And Bob, thank you again. Thank you so much for letting me spend this time with you and learning about your life. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. Much love. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you have a good night, and everyone take care. Follow me, follow Bob. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Good night, everyone.